As I was saying the other day around, it's high time that you start talking of something called as corporate governance structures in India, procedures in India, for a simple reason, because in the world in which we are, it makes a lot of sense in terms of understanding कि ये पूरा structure इंडिया के केस में ऑपरेट कैसे होता है. Now all of this acquires a different urgency altogether. कारण गेल्या आठवड्यापर्यंत when I was talking about this, I was talking about it in the context of the way in which the budget has been formed, the way in which the economic survey has been formed, and the way in which all of this has been influenced. But since yesterday, now I have a new thing to sort of ponder about, which is this local municipal corporation elections which have happened in the state of Maharashtra, the sort of results that are there in front of you, the sort of sense of bewilderment that people have, in the sense कि कुछ तो भी बहुत ही अजब हुआ है और कुछ तो भी बहुत ही रेवोल्यूशनरी या रैडिकल हुआ है. मतलब एक अनबिलीवेबल किस्म का sort of revolution is afoot, that something grand has happened. And of course to a certain extent that's true, nobody wants to deny that, because if you look at the performance of the BJP, which has stopped almost all the corporations in 2012, and if you compare it with 2017, तो performance wise उसमें काफ़ी अंतर है, और वो अंतर आपको at least on the face of it, on paper, makes you feel कि there's something big which is afoot. But is it really the case? And how does one try to make sense of all of this, especially as I said, in the context of something called as corporate governance? I'm falling back on a couple of surveys which have been made by the financial papers in India and by the different types of industrial sectors in India. India का worst sector of the economy जो है, which has a worst record when it comes to corporate governance, worst, मतलब there is nothing as worse as that, is what is called as real estate. The second worst sector that performs when it comes to corporate governance in India is what is called as infrastructure. The third worst sector is mining and extractive industries. Okay, so जर त्याची वर्गवारी लावायची झाली की सगळ्यात वाईट firms when it comes to corporate governance, सगळ्यात वाईट. Now we are talking about this in the context of all the sort of amendments which have been made to the Companies Act in 2013, almost an overall act which is in existence since 2013. The present day structures of corporate governance in India operate under what is known as the Companies Act of 2013. The Act of 2013 replaces the Act of 1956. So the last act which we had to this was what was called as the 1956 Act. ये 2013 वाला एक्ट जो है ये 1956 एक्ट को एक तरह से रिप्लेस करता है. All of this is managed by what is known as the Ministry of Company Affairs. Okay, and ह्याची effective nodal agency जी आहे which will take care of whether a firm is in some way or the other in any form of contrivance. It's in some way or the other contravening any of the provisions of the Companies Act. The nodal agency for this is what is known as Securities and Exchange Board of India. So the one agency which is supposed to act if there is any sort of a flaw when it comes to the operations of firms in India under the Companies Act of 2013, the nodal agency which will act is what is known as SEBI. Okay, हमारे पास इसके अलावा और कोई तरीका नहीं है. मतलब हमारा तरीका जो है वो लीगल है, हमारा उसका जो ऑपरेशनल तरीका है वो एक तरह से क्वासी लीगल है in the form of SEBI. And it's SEBI that is supposed to take charge of everything. So if any firm goes wrong, and most of the time they depend on what are called as the filings by the firms with SEBI itself. So SEBI is supposed to receive a vast number of filings. There are multiple filings which are supposed to be done throughout the year. So वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या reports, वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या compliances is what they are supposed to file up with SEBI. And it's on the basis of these filings that SEBI can take a call on this कि you are in contravention of any of the provisions of the Companies Act of 2013 and they can act against you. Okay, I'll very soon come to that कि ये exactly किस तरह से ऑपरेट होता है और इसके जो governing principles है वो क्या है. But just let me dwell a bit on this corporation elections before I move into all of this कि यहाँ दोन मधले connections exactly कसे work out होता. As I said, the best sectors are obviously the IT sector in India. So if you look at the top 5 sectors, one is IT, second is pharmaceuticals, third is the automobile industry. So हे तीन जे आहेत, they are supposed to be the best sectors of the economy when it comes to the best corporate governance norms. Save for what happened over the past couple of months, couple of weeks, especially with 2 big firms in India which are connected with IT, namely A is Tata. Of course, the Tata problem is a group problem. It's not a problem related to the Tata's का IT firm. So Tata's का problem जो है वो पूरे group का problem है. And second is a problem that goes to the bone of this company, that is known as Infosys. So ये जो 2 firms है कि जो गए कुछ हफ्तों में are in talks about what are called, they've been talked all over the place in terms of they possibly have some of the worst corporate governance standards. And Infosys का ट्रबल तो ये है कि Infosys की केस में डिबेट कंपनी के जो प्रोमोटर्स फाउंडर्स हैं उन्होंने ही शुरू किया है. So it wasn't until and unless you had Narayan Murthy coming up with this idea that Infosys possibly has declining standards when it comes to corporate governance. And then you had Infosys के independent directors in the form of Kiran Mazumdar-Shah and the others picking up the tab to insist on this, that possibly there is no corporate governance problem at Infosys. So Infosys का problem कुछ अलग ही है, वो corporate governance के साथ ताल्लुक नहीं रखता है. But Narayan Murthy went all over the town painting it red, making it clear to anybody who was ready to heed him and hear him that the problem that we have in our hand is what is called as corporate governance issues at Infosys. So ये जो 2 firms है कि जो IT के साथ एक तरह से ताल्लुक रखती है, पहला वाला फर्म का IT एक कोर इशू है, वो उसका एक साइड इशू है, वो उसका कोर इशू नहीं है. दूसरे फर्म के केस में IT उसका कोर इशू है. तो ये 2 IT firms अगर आप छोड़ दो तो normally it is believed that all the IT firms in India, when it comes to the IT sector in India, are firms which normally abide by the best corporate governance norms. Then you have the pharmaceutical and the automobile industries that normally move in tandem with all of this and are supposed to be the best sectors when it comes to good practices. The worst sector, as I said, एक is mining and extractive, second is infrastructure, last सबसे घटिया अगर corporate governance norms किसी के है तो वो है रियल एस्टेट सेक्टर के. अब उसके बैकग्राउंड पे आप इस चीज को समझने का कोशिश कीजिए एज टू व्हाट हैपेंड इन प्लेसेस लाइक थाना, मुंबई, नासिक, पूना yesterday and how significant or relevant is all of that. And also like to link it up with what I had said in the last session when I had said this, that the fundamental problem that we have in India is of an unformed capitalism. Of course I don't know whether this word unformed can really be used for what we have on our hands, क्योंकि अगर 25 साल के बाद भी ये इसी तरह से अनफॉर्म्ड है तो ये शायद कभी बनने ही नहीं वाला है. सो 25 साल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स के बाद कैन वन रियली यूज द वर्ड अनफॉर्म टू डिस्क्राइब दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ फिनोमेना? आई रियली डोंट नो अबाउट दैट. सो आई हैव माय ओन डाउट्स अबाउट इट. पर ये जो प्रॉब्लम है कि व्हाई इज इट दैट द बीजेपी स्कोर्ड सो बिग एंड यू हैव ऑल मैनर ऑफ एनालिसिस, मतलब स्पेशली इट इज वेरी अम्यूजिंग टू रीड न्यूज़पेपर्स and to read all manner of, जिसको बोलते हैं ना, election related analysis on day 2. मतलब day 1 को जब हो रहा है उसको सुनने में कोई फायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि even the people who are blabbering about it on TV don't understand as to what is exactly happening. So ते काय बोलतात त्यांचं त्यांनाच कळत नाही. Day 2 is the more interesting day when you should sit with the newspapers and try reading and making sense of it. की काय बोललं जातंय, काय सांगितलं जातंय. म्हणजे आम्हाला तर पुण्यात कळलंच नाही की आमच्या इथं पुण्यात काल क्रांतीच झाली. म्हणजे मला तर सिरियसलीच कळलं नाही की एवढी मोठी क्रांती झाली आणि आपल्याला कळलं पण नाही की आपल्या शहरामध्ये क्रांती झाली. इट वॉज व्हेन आय स्टार्टेड रीडिंग द न्यूजपेपर्स टुडे अँड एस्पेशली स्टार्टेड रीडिंग द इंग्लिश न्यूजपेपर्स दॅट आय स्टार्टेड गेटिंग दिस फील दॅट किती करंट असावा माणसांनी की काल आपल्या इथं क्रांती झाली आणि आपल्याला जाणवलं पण नाही की काल आपल्या इथं क्रांती झाली. म्हणतो दॅट बॅड. ओके, आता one of the two things is wrong. Either I am wrong or possibly they are wrong. Okay, I've got to say possibly they are wrong कारण ते फार शहाणी माणसं आहेत. त्याच्यामुळे कदाचित आपलीच चूक झालेली असते की आपल्याला कळलं नाही की आपल्या इथे एवढी मोठी घटना आहे. And of course, how can I forget Pimpri Chinchwad and all of this? So you have to add Pimpri Chinchwad also into all of this. And I was told everything कि dynamic leadership है, committed to development है. I'm very sorry about this, to puncture it this way. But my understanding of this whole discourse of development, which is rapidly evolving in India, आणि जिकडं बघा तिकडं everybody is talking about something called as development. either I am a fool that I don't understand it, or possibly there's a problem in the way in which this word is being used. तुम्ही कुठं पण बघा, म्हणजे especially if you look at, you open up TV every day in the evening, you look at all those characters in the Uttar Pradesh election moving all across the state, वो जिधर भी जाते हैं सब लोग एक ही चीज के बारे में बात करते हैं, they talk of something called as development. And no one understands as to what is this term exactly all about. मतलब exactly क्या है विकास, exactly क्या किस्म की चीज है. My simple deduction, I use a very simple logic for this. Development is real estate development. There is no other development. Development का सीधी तौर पे मतलब ये है कि या तो कोई एक जमीन का टुकड़ा है जिसमें आपको कुछ एक रियल एस्टेट के एसेट्स डेवलप करने हैं, या कोई एक जमीन का टुकड़ा है जिसमें ऑलरेडी कुछ एक रियल एस्टेट के एसेट्स है जिसको आपको फिर से डेव्हलप करना आहे. मे बी 1-2 मजली घर आहे, 3 मजली घर आहे, त्याच्या जागी आपल्याला 11 मजली काहीतरी बांधायचं आहे. मे एक मोठं घर आहे, त्याच्या जागी आपल्याला मॉल आणि बरंच काय काय बांधायचं आहे. असं जे काही असतं ना त्याला डेव्हलपमेंट म्हणतात. आता ह्याच्याबद्दल माझी खात्री पटलेली. आय डोंट नो अबाउट यू, बट आय स्टार्टेड सॉर्ट ऑफ गेटिंग कम्प्लीटली कन्फर्म्ड इन दिस, especially with the sort of people that Devendra Fadnavis is hanging around with these days. तो I'm completely confirmed की डेव्हलपमेंट, विकास या शब्दाचा दुसरा कुठलाही अर्थ नाही आहे, त्याचा फक्त एकच अर्थ आहे, तो म्हणजे रिअल एस्टेट डेव्हलपमेंट आहे. And it's but obvious that it cannot mean anything else other than that, for good or for evil. Okay, forget that. When the one thing which you have not spoken about is this man is what is called the urban development minister. As urban development minister, as I was urging the point in my last session, he has a vast amount of discretionary power. A vast amount of discretionary power when it comes to dealing with land parcels in practically all the urbanities. बरं, काल जे काही सगळ्या निवडणुकीला गेलेले ते सगळ्या urbanities आहेत. ह्या urbanities सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचं फीचर असं आहे, all of them starting off from Bombay going all the way to Nagpur. Nagpur is presently evolving in that direction. And a couple of years it's going to be almost in the same league. या सगळ्यांचं सगळ्यात मोठं वैशिष्ट्य काय आहे? They have, as of now, as far as their municipal jurisdictions are concerned, limited amount of land, as opposed to a certain amount of aspirational middle class which lives within these lands, which aspires to at least a small piece that can be called as the home of their own. So तुम्हारा फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम ये है कि आपके जो म्युनिसिपल जुरिस्डिक्शंस है उनकी फ्रंटियर्स आज की तारीख में जितनी है उसके अंदर, उस फ्रंटियर के अंदर जितना जमीन है वो जमीन लिमिटेड है, और उसमें रहने वाला पॉपुलेशन जो है वो साल दर साल बढ़ता जा रहा है और वो इसी तरह से बढ़ते रहने वाला है. ओके, अच्छा, इसका बहुत बड़ा पॉपुलेशन ऐसा है विच एस्पायर्स टू होम ऑफ इट्स ओन एट एन अफोर्डेबल प्राइस. And the one authority that has a phenomenal role in terms of influencing these developments is the Urban Development Minister. And it's not unusual. Maharashtra's chief ministers have been their urban development ministers for a long period of time since the 1990s. Even before that. त्याच्या आधीचा त्यांचा असलेला प्रायमरी इंटरेस्ट हा मुंबई अर्बन मध्ये होता. त्याच्यानंतरचा असलेला त्यांचा प्रायमरी इंटरेस्ट इज इन ऑल द अर्बन्स ऑफ द स्टेट. It's not at all something that needs a big amount of physics to understand that the worst sector of the Indian economy when it comes to governance standards is real estate. The one sector which is going to play a major role as far as yesterday's election results are concerned is real estate. The chief minister comes from a party which has the sort of discretionary authority which is required to go about influencing the developments as far as this real estate thing is concerned. In his capacity as both the chief minister as well as the urban development minister. एवढं सोडून बाकी सगळा टाइमपास चाललेला, सगळा, की किती दूरदृष्टी, की he took on the Pawars in Pimpri Chinchwad, which is a joke all by itself, and the Thakres in Mumbai. So man stands for a break from the old type of politics which is rooted in dynasty, neglecting the fact that almost every third candidate of the BJP which has won is basically a dynast. Every third candidate, शायद नंबर उससे भी ज़्यादा होगा, वो किसी ना किसी तरह से डायनेस्ट है. वो किसी का हस्बैंड है, किसी का बाप है, किसी का बेटा है, किसी का कुछ ना कुछ तो भी है। क्या बकवास कर रहे हो आप? आपकी समझ में भी नहीं आ रहा है कि आप क्या बकवास कर रहे हो। अच्छा, why does the media talk bullshit and doesn't understand that it is talking bullshit? Was one of the most important elements that goes about influencing the flow of media in the state of Maharashtra are firms which are in some way or the other related to real estate or firms that play a seminal role in the development of real estate. ये आपका पूरा मीडिया जो है ना, ये उसके बहुत बड़े एडवर्टाइजर्स है। Think in terms of how many times you open up the paper and the first ad on the paper itself is a jacket ad of some firm related to IT, of some firm related to real estate, which has gone about advertising for developed spaces in your city. पूरा jacket ad है, पूरा भर के। ये लोग आपके एडवर्टाइजर्स हैं। आपके मीडिया वाले तो नॉनसेंस ही बात करने वाले हैं, उनको अकल नाम का पता है ही नहीं। अच्छा, अकल न होना इज द फर्स्ट क्राइटेरिया बाय व्हिच यू रिक्रूट पीपल इन द मीडिया, एंड स्पेशली दोज हू आर सपोज्ड टू बी टॉकिंग माउथ्स इन द इव्हनिंग ऑन टीव्ही, त्याची तर सगळ्यात पहिली क्रायटेरिया आहे, म्हणजे तोंड मोठं असलं पाहिजे आणि डोकं खूपच लहान असलं पाहिजे. इट्स ऑल अबाउट रियल एस्टेट. It's all about this discretion that this man called as a chief minister has. It's all about a sector which is deeply murky, completely unreformed, and very basic to the development of any capitalist economy. Land almost किसी भी capitalist enterprise की development का पहला premise है. किसी भी वेंचर का, any firm that you go about developing in capitalism, the first most important thing that you have got to take cognizance of is something called as land. एवढी सिंपल गोष्ट है. It's just 2 + 2 that needs to be put together. It's there in front of you. The answer is 4. The Maharashtra chief minister is also the urban development minister. He has a critical role to play in all of this. Obviously, from it follows the next deductive logic that the Bharatiya Janata Party, the party to which he is going to belong to, is going to play a significant role when it comes to winning these elections, especially on the backdrop of something called as demonetization. So demonetization ने जिस किस्म का एक artificial pressure in the economy create किया है, demonetization ने जिस किस्म का एक artificial किस्म का scarcity in the economy create किया है, and on top of it, the impending threat of something called as tax terrorism. So obviously, some of the most important people who would be threatened with something called as tax evasion cases are people who belong to the real estate sector. One man who is already in jail actually was at some point of time a proprietor of a firm called as Armstrong Builders. Armstrong ला मराठीमध्ये भुजबळ असं म्हणतात. इथे लक्षात, it's that critical. So आपके यहाँ पे डिमोनेटाइजेशन हो चुका है, उससे एक आर्टिफिशियल स्कार्सिटी क्रिएट हुआ है, आर्टिफिशियल प्रेशर क्रिएट हुआ है. ऊपर से आपने लोगों को ये थ्रेटन किया है कि आपके जितने भी टैक्स फाइलिंग्स है ना, वी वुड गो अबाउट चेकिंग इट अप विथ योर बैंक अकाउंट्स एंड देन लेट्स हैव फन ऑन आवर हैंड्स. So it's little wonder that things are going to fall into line exactly in the same pattern and manner. It's not at all a surprise that in Pune, the BJP's working headquarters are located on the same road on which Kakade Builders is located. So ये आश्चर्य वाला बात नहीं है. मतलब अगर कल को भाजपा नहीं जीतती, then that would have been a surprise by all reckoning. It's not at all surprising that the party has won. Actually, the more important question that needs to be answered is, with everything that it did, to quote Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, how did it miserably fail in Bombay? Why didn't it cross over beyond that 100 वाला mark? That is the most important abiding mystery of this entire game. कि जो होना चाहिए था पर जो नहीं हुआ, इतना सब खेलने के बाद भी बंबई में आप शिवसेना के 2 सीट पीछे कैसे अटक गए? I'm getting it? So it's not at all a very complicated thing in terms of understanding. It's a very simple thing. These are only sections of your entire electoral process who would have the necessary amount of liquid cash to move in the event of an election, an impending election. They are the only people who can use that cash to go about fixing up votes. So it's not at all a surprise that you end up being the victorious party. Of course, this is not a surprise at all. जो भी पार्टी पार में होता in Bombay and would be in the control of something called the Urban Development Ministry would be the party which would also be in a position to influence the conduct of these elections. There is nothing unusual about this. Absolutely nothing. What is unusual is people haven't talked about this and have talked about everything under the sun. आणि सगळ्या अशा गोष्टी की ज्या बिलकुल लागू पडत नाहीत, एकही गोष्ट त्याच्यातली लागू पडत नाही. ही सगळ्यात महत्त्वाची गोष्ट लागू पडते तिच्याबद्दल एक सकाळ शब्द उच्चारलेला ना. असो, यू लिव्ह विथ इट अँड यू एन्जॉय इट. आ रहा है समझ में? सो हैव फन. I don't know as to what needs to be done with that. Let's get back to my business. Corporate governance has been defined by the Government of India in the Companies Act as a process set up for the firms based on certain systems and principles by which a company is governed. The guidelines provided ensure that the company is directed and controlled in a way so as to achieve the goals and objectives to add value to the company and also benefit the stakeholders in the longer term. Okay, the key word, the key operative principle in this is what is called as stakeholders. It is different from something called as shareholders. So there are two different types of concepts that underpin the new firm as far as the 21st century is concerned. The most important concept that underpins it is what is called as stakeholders. So we are not looking merely at shareholders who for all practical purposes are what are called as the proprietors and owners of the firm. So in proportion to your shareholding, you have an ownership stake as far as the firm is concerned. But beyond the shareholders, there's a whole list of people who have an interest in seeing to it that the firm flourishes, the firm subsists, and the firm thrives in an ecosystem which turns out to be profitable to everybody. This includes what are called as the employees of the firm. This includes what are called as the multiple vendors and suppliers to the firm. This includes the consumers and customers of the firm. This includes the overall ecosystem within which the firm operates. So this is about the animate as well as the inanimate ecosystem. So जो सोसाइटीज और कम्युनिटीज में आप ऑपरेट कर रहे हो उनके बारे में वो शायद आपसे डायरेक्टली लिंक नहीं है. मतलब वो आपके एम्प्लॉयज नहीं है, वो आपके सप्लायर्स नहीं है, वो आपके लिए काम नहीं करते, वो शायद आपके कस्टमर्स भी नहीं है. पर फिर भी अंडर दीज रूल्स आफ्टर 2013 you are supposed to be responsible for them, and it also includes the inanimate ecosystem, namely in the form of environment and ecology. So practically at every end the firm has to end up becoming something that is going to add value to everybody, and if it is adding value it works well only then. अगर वो value नहीं add कर रहा है, अगर इसमें से एक के भी बारे में problem है तो you have a problem on your hand. So other than the shareholders, you have got to take care of all of the others. These are what are known as stakeholders of the firm. अच्छा, 2013 का law हमारी केस में is a very funny law, in the sense that is the Indian firm really something that is capable of all of this? Is the Indian business का ecosystem really capable of all of this? Well, there's a big question mark on all of that. The Companies Act of 2013 is a wholesale किस्म का import from an American legislation called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, जो अमेरिकन कांग्रेस ने पास किया था 2002 में to go about governing what are called as American firms. So American firms के corporate governance standards को set up करने के लिए Sarbanes-Oxley was proposed in 2002. This comes in the backdrop of the 1998 का recession. So जो 1998 में recession शुरू हुआ था, which started off in Southeast Asia, moved to Mexico, Russia, Turkey, and practically all of the known Western world. It's on the backdrop of that you had this sort of a thing coming in, which said that the problem with most of the corporations that we now have is sort of they are committed to maximizing shareholder value, but they are at the cost of what is called as neglecting the interest of the other stakeholders. So problem ये हो रहा है कि companies increasingly shareholder values को maximize कर रही है. हर किस्म की कोशिश कर रही है कि what should be done is shareholder value should keep on maximizing, but the way by which you are aiming to maximize shareholder value is coming at the cost of the other stakeholders. So आप शायद environmental laws, आप शायद consumer laws, इन सबको एक तरह से ताक पे रख रहे हो. You are not paying adequate amount of attention to them, and you are just trying to maximize something called as shareholder value, and this in the long term is going to be disastrous. Of course, most of these firms had no long term to think of. So most of these firms were in for what is known as a certain sort of short termism, In the case of which, what is very important is the here and the now. We are not interested in what is going to happen 10 years down the line. The 10 years down the line is 2002 में Sarbanes-Oxley आएगा, 2008 में you will have the Great Recession coming in with Lehman Brothers finally closing down. So a company which had been in existence for almost 140 years and more will go, because of the activities of its promoters and its managers, if it gets into a situation where it has to be shut down, there is no problem. वाईट वाटून घेऊ नये हे असं घडत राहणार आहे, कारण कॅपिटलिझम इसेन्शियली इज अबाउट व्हॉट इज कॉल्ड एज क्रिएटिव्ह डिस्ट्रक्शन. So if it is about creative destruction, you should not be worried about this, that maybe in the long term the firm would be dead. What you should be doing is, let's party in the short term. तो जहां तक शॉर्ट टर्म है ना, वहां तक सोचने का है. आजच्या दिवसाला शेअरची प्राइस 140 आहे ना, उद्या सकाळी 141 142 च्या पलीकडे कशी जाईल याचा विचार करायचा. पण असं करण्याच्या प्रोसेसमध्ये मे बी ॲट सम पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम इन द नियर फ्युचर द कंपनी विल स्टॉप फंक्शनिंग. जाऊ दे ना, फार विचार नाही करायचा. वी हॅव इन्स्टिट्यूशनल स्ट्रक्चर्स, वी हॅव लेजिस्लेटिव्ह ऍक्ट्स बाय विच वी कॅन स्टॉप द फंक्शनिंग ऑफ द फर्म, फाईल अप फॉर बँक्रप्सी. वेगवेगळे जे काही प्रोमोटर्स मॅनेजर्स आहेत त्यांनी आपापला वाटा याच्यातनं काढून घ्यावा, त्याच्यानंतर सगळं जे काही ते विकून टाकून मोकळं. Sarbanes-Oxley comes on the backdrop of something which says that this is completely unethical, should not be promoted, and governments for no reason should stand behind such a mindset or these types of actions. So what you should be doing is you should be regulating it better. Okay, they needed to kill the beast right at the center of it, which was about what is called as footloose finance. They did not do anything about that. So Sarbanes-Oxley doesn't target something called as the financing of the firm. Sarbanes-Oxley खाली एक ही चीज के बारे में कंसर्न्ड है कि ये जो मल्टीपल स्टेक होल्डर्स है एज फार द फर्म इज कंसर्न्ड, हाउ वुड यू गो अबाउट प्रोटेक्टिंग देयर इंटरेस्ट. अच्छा, द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट स्टेक होल्डर दैट Sarbanes-Oxley इज मोस्टली इंटरेस्टेड इन इज व्हाट आर कॉल्ड एज माइनॉरिटी शेयर होल्डर्स. सो जिसको रिटेल शेयर होल्डर कहते हैं, जिसको माइनॉरिटी शेयर होल्डर कहते हैं, जिसको इंडिविजुअल शेयर होल्डर कहते हैं, हमारा सबसे प्राइमरी कंसर्न जो है वो है. लेट मी गिव यू एन एग्जाम्पल. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एज फार एज टाटा बिजनेसेस आर कंसर्न्ड, there's something called as Tata Sons, which is supposed to be the holding company when it comes to these 9 or 10 companies of the Tata group which are listed on the stock markets. So याची holding firm जी आहे ना ती Tata Sons आहे. Tata Sons मध्ये 66% of the owner of Tata Sons is a man called as Ratan Tata. So he is what is known as the majority shareholder as far as this firm is concerned. He is for all practical purposes a promoter of this firm. And इसके अलावा you have what are known as the minority shareholders. One of the major minority shareholders is the Cyrus Mistry family, who have 18% stake in this firm. Okay, and मग त्याच्यानंतर you will have all shareholders who possibly have a very small amount as far as the entire business is concerned. आता most of the pre-2000 world firms were never concerned about something called as minority shareholders. तो तुम्हाला रितसर निमंत्रण दिलं जायचं की बाबा कंपनीची मीटिंग आहे, तुम्ही त्याला या, वी हॅव गॉट टू डिस्कस पॉलिसी, वी हॅव गॉट टू थ्रॅश इट आउट, वी हॅव गॉट टू डिसाइड ऑन द फ्युचर कोर्स ऑफ ॲक्शन ॲज फार एज द बिझनेस इज कन्सर्न्ड. पण तुम्ही नाही जरी आले ना तरी आम्हाला काही फरक पडत नव्हता. सो वी कुड टेक ऑल डिसिजन्स बिटवीन आवरसेल्व्स, वी कुड गेट ऑल ऑफ दिस डन एंड नॉट बी वरीड अबाउट दिस एट ऑल इन टर्म्स ऑफ ये कैसे काम करेगा. ओके, post 2002, especially after the recession of 1998, the primary concern was कि ये सब में एक जो प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है ना, रिटेल इन्वेस्टर का इंटरेस्ट इज नॉट गेटिंग safeguarded, is not getting secured in this entire business. अगर रिटेल शेयर होल्डर इसी तरह से फर्म से दूर जाता रहा तो इट इज गोइंग टू क्रिएट अ मेजर प्रॉब्लम इन द फंक्शनिंग ऑफ द स्टॉक मार्केट इटसेल्फ. The stock market doesn't function in terms of public filings with the stock authorities. In the American case, it's what is known as the Security Exchange Commission. In our case, it's known as SEBI. So, उसके पास जो public filing है, वो सारे documents public है. It's on the basis of it that a shareholder is supposed to make a decision about या firm मध्ये गुंतवणूक करणं हे safe आहे की नाही आहे. आणि ती जी तुम्ही गुंतवणूक करणार आहात, that is what is going to raise the capital stock of the firm. Okay, in the absence of the retail shareholder who is leaving by droves because he is no longer in a way able to trust you with the governance of the company, प्रॉब्लम ये था कि इट्स क्रिएटिंग अ मॉरल इश्यू एज फार एज कैपिटलिज्म इटसेल्फ इज कंसर्न. सो हैव गॉट टू डू समथिंग अबाउट इट. उसका इंटरेस्ट फिक्स करना बहुत जरूरी है. तो जिसके लिए हमने सार्कन-सॉक्सली लाया, ये कहते हुए कि a whole set of practices needs to be put into place whereby the retail, the individual shareholders investment interest can be retained. 2013 ला ज्याला कंपनीज ऍक्ट आपल्याकडे येतो त्याला त्याची परिस्थिती तीच आहे. तो येतोय ऑन द बॅकड्रॉप ऑफ द 2008 का रिसेशन. आणि तो येत असताना फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लेम जो झालेला आहे तो इज 9, 10, 11 द युनियन गव्हर्नमेंट हॅज पुश्ड अ ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ मनी इनटू द इकॉनॉमी with the intention that this will provide some sort of a stimulus. By 2012 it is very clear कोई stimulus नहीं आने वाला है क्योंकि आपके कंपनीज के जो बिजनेस मॉडल्स है वो बहुत ज़्यादा फॉल्टी है. So in 2013 we finally come up with this piece of legislation which says that what needs to be fixed up is what is known as the corporate governance structure and culture of the firms in India. अच्छा, we did funny things. We तो went एकदम one step beyond the Americans. आपण तर इतक्या भारी भारी गोष्टी केलेल्या आहेत की तुम्ही त्याचा विचारच करू शकत नाही. एक, देर शुड बी अ वुमन डायरेक्टर ऑन ईच ऑफ द कंपनी बोर्ड्स. द वन सेट ऑफ फर्म्स विच वर फाउंड टू बी इन कॉन्ट्रवेंशन ऑफ दिस even almost 3 years after the law was made was the public sector firms. So 2016 मध्ये when they went about finding out की कंपनीजला 2013 च्या ऍक्ट अंतर्गत सगळ्यात पहिली महत्त्वाची गोष्ट ती सांगितलेली आहे की प्रत्येक कंपनीचा जो बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स आहे त्याच्यामध्ये मिनिमम एक स्त्री असली पाहिजे की who's going to be a director. Of course this has a certain sort of value associated with it. मतलब आपका कंपनी का टर्नओवर कुछ 1000 करोड़ का, कुछ 100 करोड़ का, कुछ 500 करोड़ का होना चाहिए. तो उस सिचुएशन में आपका कंपनी बोर्ड जो है उसमें एक औरत होनी चाहिए. Funnily enough, in 2016 what they suddenly realized was the one set of firms which do not have women directors on them are what are known as the public sector firms. So the government legislates with one hand, does not obey things as it legislates on the other. Then there's this whole set of directors who are supposed to be independent directors. And independent directors का primary काम था to safeguard the interest of what are called the minority shareholders. So जेवढे ही minority shareholders है, जेवढे ही retail shareholders है, इनका interest जो है इसको defend करने का काम independent directors का है. Independent director का सीधा मतलब ये है कि किसी भी किस्म का फाइनेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन इस कंपनी के साथ आपका नहीं होना चाहिए. किसी भी किस्म का एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम इन योर लाइफ. टाटा हैव फनी इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स. टाटा सन्स का बोर्ड हैज पीपल हु आर इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स हु एट डिफरेंट पॉइंट्स ऑफ टाइम हैव इंटरफेस फाइनेंशियली विद द टाटास. And that's one major problem that Mistry wrote about to SEBI, saying this that एक अख्खी लिस्ट आहे ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स जे इथं अपॉइंट केले गेलेले जे खरं पाहायला गेलं तर कुठल्याही अर्थाने इंडिपेंडेंट नाही. So what exactly is happening over here? You better check this out. Okay. Then came that lovely idea in terms of fixing up the responsibility of the firm, which was called as corporate social responsibility. कि firms with a turnover of 500 crores and more every year should be apportioning 2% of their turnover for a whole set of corporate social responsibilities. Most of the firms in India put this money into two sorts of very important activities. One is education, second is skill building. So या दोन गोष्टींमध्ये सगळ्यात जास्त पैसे गुंतवले जातात, सगळ्यात जास्त. आणि या दोन गोष्टींचा एक कुठेतरी खूप डायरेक्ट संबंध कंपनीच्या असलेला जो मॅन पॉवर आहे त्याच्याशी आणि कंपनीला एक्सपेक्टेड असलेला जो मॅन पॉवर आहे त्याच्याशी आहे. More than anything else, if you look at companies upon companies which are filing up with SEBI, the one thing that you find is they are very interested in something called as education. So why is it that you are so interested in education? Leave that apart, that educational ventures of a certain type over a period of time, especially as far as these firms are concerned, can be turned into commercial ventures all of their own. So जो आज corporate social responsibility के तहत शुरू होने वाले ventures है वो कल को जाके can become independent ventures of their own, independent commercial ventures of their own. These firms are quite capable of doing that. It's not unusual that post 2000 you had a whole range of people in India who come from India's corporate sector and who are suddenly promoting what are called as independent minded universities in India. So you have things like Ashoka University, You have things like Bennett University, which has been started by the Times of India group. You have things like Shiv Nadarkar University. You have things like Azam Premjiwala University in Bangalore. You have everyone who is deeply and keenly interested in something called as university development in India. Of course, पुढे जाऊन ह्या ज्या युनिव्हर्सिटीज डेव्हलप केल्या जाणार आहेत ना, ह्याच्यासाठीचा जो तुमचा कॅचमेंट एरिया आहे ना, जो आपला हक्काचा कॅचमेंट एरिया आहे, तो CSR मधनं एज्युकेट झालेली आपली पोरं आहेत. सो कंपनी CSR मधनं ज्या शाळा चालवल्या जात आहेत किंवा ज्या शाळांना फंडिंग केलं जात आहे, म्हणजे आझम प्रेमजी गोज अबाउट फंडिंग ऑलमोस्ट 35,000 schools in India. These schools become almost the default sort of area, the catchment area in which Azam Premji का education department works. और Azam Premji University has a wonderful, well-functioning department of education. और उस education department का research का area जो है ना, वो ये 35,000 schools है. These are sort of backward and forward linkages which are establishing. तुला सांगितलं 2% पैसे खर्च करून हे, तो इतक्या धोरणी पद्धतीने 2% पैसे खर्च करून येतो. आपणच विद्यापीठ स्थापन करावं. विद्यापीठ कमर्शियल इंटरेस्ट आहे, तो कम्प्लिटली वेगळा आहे, तो CSR मध्ये येत नाही. शाळांची जी मदत आहे ती CSR मध्ये येते. विद्यापीठाचे डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ एज्युकेशन जे आहे त्याच्या रिसर्च प्रोजेक्टसाठी ज्या वापरल्या जाणाऱ्या शाळा आहेत त्या CSR वाल्या शाळा. ब्रिलियंट, सिम्पली ब्रिलियंट. ओके, सो वी टोल्ड अबाउट ऑल ऑफ दिस की ह्या ज्या वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचे स्टेक होल्डर्स आहेत, how do you go about safeguarding their interests? And yet you have the sort of crisis that you have in India when it comes to both Tata as well as Infosys. One reason, as has been rightly said, now I'm not sort of trying to judge anything and I don't want to get into all of that, कारण या अशा debates आहेत की ज्या completely endless आहेत. And at the end of the day, they sort of get resolved in favor of one or the other, depending on आपका subjective position इस सारी चीज में क्या है. So one problem as far as both the Infosys as well as the Tata problem is directors who have retired from the functioning of the firm but continue to be major stakeholders in the firm. The Murthis are minority stakeholders. The Murthis are not what are called as majority shareholders in the firm. They are a minority shareholder in the firm, but they are quite substantive even at that minority level. So ये ऐसे वाले जो directors हैं, Ratan Tata is a majority shareholder. But the others, as far as the Infosys business is concerned, they are all what are called as minority shareholders. But asa asun dekhil, once you have moved out of the firm, you have become what is called a minority shareholder in the firm, you retain a keen interest in the functioning of the firm. To a level that you almost start playing a role in terms of deciding कि इस firm के साथ day-to-day basis पे क्या करना चाहिए, कि आप कर क्या रहे हो और आपकी practices कितनी गलत है. Now this is, as I said, a very subjective thing as to what was it that Cyrus Mistry was trying to do, or what was it that Vishal Sikka was trying to do, which the promoters and the founders found to be something that is deeply discomforting. So ये लोग क्या कर रहे थे कि जिसका इन लोगों को प्रॉब्लम था, इसका पूरा अंडरस्टैंडिंग बहुत ज़्यादा सब्जेक्टिव है. In terms of what were the business models that they tried to develop, what sort of businesses were they trying to cut down on, and what was the perspective in terms of आपके business के sectors में किस किस्म के changes आ रहे हैं. So when it comes to Infosys, they are very clear about this. The old model of vending software is not going to work any longer. We are almost at the end of that. We have got to think in terms of the new areas. Infosys cannot work with the sort of manpower that it has been working, with the sort of business models that it has been working, with the sort of technologies with which it has been working, for a simple reason because the sector has undergone phenomenal change. अगर आप उसी तरह की चीज़ों के बारे में करते रहोगे, अच्छा इन लोगों का प्रॉब्लम ये है, they have an interest in the new technologies, but they are sort of moved in the older ones for a simple reason because they have worked with the older ones. And of course, both of them are at the wrong side as far as their ages are concerned. So Ratan Tata maybe 20 years ago might have understood business in a completely different manner. Panjala, you are 20 years older than what you were once upon a time. You obviously tend to be more conservative. You obviously tend to cut down on risk. You obviously have a certain sort of a problem in terms of if there's something new which is proposed, which is completely hazy and grey, you don't want to venture into it. Beaten track से revenue आ रहा है ना, आपको problem क्या है? A firm is profitable. It's not that it's not profitable. So why exactly is it that you want to change things now? Let's carry on with doing the old thing again and again. And that's not something that younger CEOs who are almost at some point of time much younger than you do understand in terms of the business model itself. उनको लगता है कि आप जो बात कर रहे हो वो किसी काम का नहीं है. आपको लगता है कि देखिए ये फर्म हमने एस्टैब्लिश किया था, हमने इसको चलाया है, हम जानते हैं इसके बारे में. आप वैसे ही बाहर से आए हो और बाहर से आके यू डोंट हैव द सॉर्ट ऑफ इमोशनल कनेक्ट विद इट दैट वी हैव विद इट. So any sort of an idea which you are working, if it is not going to in the end run out to be profitable as far as the firm is concerned, we are deeply skeptical about that. Okay, having had said that, Indian firms involve themselves in practically everything which is wrong at their end of the business, every single thing. So Indian corporate sector का permanent problem ये है, जो Americans का था towards the turn of the century. The retail investor has already left the market. He's not interested in investing at all because he feels that most of these firms trade with what is known as insider information. Most of these firms are involved in what is known as buying back shares, and they most of the time buy back shares at points of time when they are precipitating crises. So they are almost in a way trying to cut you from the game. So ऐसी वाली केस में इंडिया का retail investor already इसमें interested नहीं है. The India story is happening on account of investments which are coming in from major investments from what are called as most of the mutual funds, and to a large extent it is dependent on what is called as foreign investment. So one reason why your Prime Minister keeps on doing all those very funny foreign things is precisely because you are looking out for those types of investments in the absence of domestic interest in the market itself. So domestic interest almost निकल चुका है. प्रॉब्लम ये है कि ये एक किस्म का विशियस सर्कल है. अगर वो इंटरेस्ट निकल चुका है, इफ दे आर नो लॉन्गर इंटरेस्टेड एंड इन्वेस्टेड इन इट, दे आर ऑल्सो नॉट इन अ पोजिशन टू रेगुलेट एंड इन्फ्लुएंस द कंडक्ट ऑफ द बिजनेस इटसेल्फ. दैट्स लीडिंग द बिजनेस टू मोर सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रैक्टिसेस व्हिच आर करप्ट एंड व्हिच आर पेटेंटली रॉन्ग. सो उसके लिए जरूरत इस बात का है दैट द रिटेल इन्वेस्टर हैज टू स्टे इंटरेस्टेड एंड इन्वेस्टेड. But in his absence, the problem that you are dealing with is a very simple problem कि ये business नहीं चल सकता इस तरीके से. And no one knows as to what is it that needs to be done in terms of retaining that. Of course, everyone knows as to what needs to be done. Problem is you are in the downturn of an economy. So आपका जो अभी का cycle है वो एक downturn वाला cycle है. Already your firms are heavily indebted as far as most of these banks are concerned. Now you don't want to push them further because if you keep on pushing them further, the only thing that is going to happen is they are going to fall over the edge, which is technically speaking not a wrong thing. म्हणजे अगदीच काय वाईट नाही. म्हणजे उद्या if the Tata Group firms end up in a situation wherein they are no longer from the business point of view viable, maybe they need to be sold off, so त्यात काय वाईट वाटण्यासारखं काहीच नाही आहे ना. But there's again a wrong sort of a notion which has been developed around all of this, that these are sort of what are called as national heritages. I don't know what for. So एक एकदम गलत किस्म का आइडिया है कि you should look upon Infosys, you should look upon the Tatas with some sort of reverence because these are sort of our heritage. कि ये हमारा heritage का हिस्सा है. तो वो एक और additional किस्म का problem है in the functioning of all of this, in terms of getting transparency, in terms of getting a certain sort of probity when it comes to the conducting of their affairs. Okay, they keep on fixing things. One thing that was demanded in 2013 Companies Act में, you should keep on rotating your auditors. So you should not have the same set of auditors auditing your accounts year upon year. Because most of them had these wonderful practices of being almost married to their auditors. And I'm literally saying they were married to their auditors. कि firm के promoters जो है find out good respectable auditors in the field कि जिनका अपना कुछ एक sort of status है, अपना एक वजन है, अपना एक network है, and end up marrying people from within the promoter's family with the intention कि auditor अब घर में ही आ जाएगा ना, तो बाहर का auditor को ढूंढने का जरूरत ही नहीं है. अच्छा, what you do with an auditor at home is you continuously keep on cooking the books, showing the firm either to be, of course our firms don't do that for a simple reason, कारण त्यांचे turnover आणि business margin is खूपच बेकार आहे. They are not like the Amazon firms. Amazon is a beautiful firm which mints money in trillions every year, but for the last 20 years has succeeded in proving this to the world that it's a company that is not profitable. So Amazon is not a profitable firm, despite the fact that Amazon cut turnover turns almost into trillions. So if you take into consideration पूरा Amazon का turnover all across the world, it goes into trillions and more. पण तरी देखील year upon year we have been trying to convince people around कि आपण ना profit, we are not making profit in this. We are just burning cash into this. We just आणि मी सगळ्यांना सांगायचं, मी कर्मचारी जे आहेत त्यांना पण सांगायचं पैसेच नाही आहेत, काय करणार? तुम्हाला पटते का बघा की मी कसं की रोज एक 12-14 तास काम करायला लागेल आणि महिन्याच्या शेवटी एक 10 ते 12,000 डॉलर देतो, which is like exploitation, nothing less than that in the United States. I don't know if you know about those Amazon documentaries or those lovely Amazon stories in terms of how did Amazon employees go about talking to everybody right, left and center to prove that the company is deeply exploitative. Deeply, उसका पूरा business practice exploitative है. So लोकांना सांगायचं आपल्याकडे पैसे नाही, SEC ला सांगायचं पैसे नाही, SEC ने एकदा तर सर्टिफाय केलं पैसे नाही, मग तर खूपच छान. मग सगळ्या प्रकारच्या टॅक्स अथॉरिटीजला जाऊन सांगून यायचं पैसेच नाही आहेत, तुम्हाला टॅक्स कुठनं देऊ? आणि बाबा हॅज अ प्रायव्हेट इंटरेस्ट इन स्पेस एक्सप्लोरेशन अँड हॅज प्रायव्हेट प्रोजेक्ट्स वर्किंग टुवर्ड्स दॅट. बाबा इज जेफ बेझोस, who while running a firm which is not making money can find $125 million to go out and buy the Washington Post. हो याच्यासाठी पैसे, पण टॅक्स अथॉरिटीजला द्यायला नल्ल, कर्मचाऱ्यांना द्यायला नल्ल. यू आर रनिंग वंडरफुल बिझनेसेस. तो याच्यासाठी ऑडिटर घरातला पाहिजे. ऑडिटर कसा घरातला असला ना म्हणजे हे सगळे धंदे व्यवस्थित करतायत, जाऊन सगळ्यांना ताब्यात करतात की अहो मी ना लय गरीब आहे, काही नाही याच्यामध्ये. मग यांना सांगितलं होतं यू रोटेट युअर ऑडिटर्स. देयर शुडंट बी एनी सिचुएशन कि ज्याच्यामध्ये एक ऑडिटर जिसने आपका अकाउंट्स को ऑडिट किया है वो पूरा 5 साल का साइकिल में आपके पास अकाउंट्स ऑडिट करने के लिए दोबारा नहीं आना चाहिए. पण हे सगळं खूप हॅपहॅझार्ड आहे इन द सेन्स दॅट तुम्ही मला सांगितलं की आय एम ऑडिटर विच हॅज बीन sanctioned by firm A to audit its accounts this year. Fine, ठीक है. Now the law says that for the next 5 years I'm not supposed to audit their accounts. Good, great. But I don't audit accounts all on my own. I have a whole team of people who do that. The law nowhere says this. Now one of the people who is connected with this auditing activity cannot go ahead and form a second auditing firm. So आम्ही 5 जण firm A कडनं firm B चं ऑडिट करायला आलो. लॉचं म्हणणं आहे की firm A नी परत 5 वर्षांमध्ये फर्म बी चं ऑडिट करायचं नाहीये. ठीक आहे, फर्म ए कॅन एंड अप क्रिएटिंग मोर न्यू फर्म्स. सो वी कैन क्रिएट अ न्यू फर्म कॉल्ड एज A1, A2, A3. लॉ अपनी जगह सही है ना. आज की तारीख में फर्म ए ने आपका ऑडिट किया, नेक्स्ट ईयर फर्म A1 कम्स टू ऑडिट योर अकाउंट्स. फर्म A1 टेक्निकली एटलीस्ट ऑन पेपर इज अ डिफरेंट फर्म ऑल टुगेदर. द प्रोविजन ऑफ द लॉ हैज बीन मेट. But firm A1 has been promoted, has been bankrolled by people connected with firm A. ह्याच्यावर कसा कंट्रोल ठेवणार? So हे सगळं at the end of the day is what is called as paperwork. It ends up becoming nothing more than paperwork. अच्छा, the problem that is severe, as say for example the Infosys problem was, किंवा as Cyrus would say the Ratan Tata problem was, the gap on an average between the company's CEOs and the company's workers in most of the known capitalist world has risen up from something like 40 times in the 1970s to 350 times now. So 1970s में ये वाला जो गैप था कि CEO से लेके आपका एवरेज वर्कर जो है इसका इनकम गैप जो है वो ऑन एन एवरेज 40 टाइम्स था. The CEO is making 40 times more money as compared to your average worker. Now in 2017, as we are talking about this, the gap between the CEO and the average worker stands at 350 times. It's huge and it keeps on becoming huge. Acha, for workers it's more terrible. For a simple reason, because हे जे 350 times असलेलं डिफरेंशियल है, either you accept it or you get lost. हाफ द टाइम तो हमको आपका जरूरत है नहीं, आप बस बोलो कि इसको निकाल देना है, हम इसको निकाल देंगे. उसके बाद we might go about substituting a whole set of work done by people with some smart machines which can take charge of everything. So we anyway don't need these buggers. Let them get lost. Are you getting it? 350 times is huge. It's simply huge. And at 350 times, what do CEOs go about doing? Buying things like the Washington Post. सगळं सोडून तो वॉशिंग्टन पोस्ट खरेदी करायला कशाला गेला? अच्छा, Bezos sort of assured the Post and everybody who's connected with the Post that the Post has an independent editorial line. I'm not going to interfere in its functioning. But how do people outside judge this and know for sure that the independent line is getting upheld? Why is it that you are interested in a media firm? Current media firms, at the end of the day, especially in functioning democracies, have a very important role in terms of molding people's opinions when it comes to electing public officials. We want ऐसे public officials who once in that public office would take care of our interests through the sort of policies that they make and the sort of taxation policies that they roll out. So हमारे दो प्राइमरी इंटरेस्ट है आप में, टैक्स और आपका पॉलिसी. तो हम ऐसे लोग चाहते हैं वहां पे चुने जाएं कि जो लोग हमारे इंटरेस्ट का जो पूरा ख्याल है वो रखेंगे. That's the reason why I need a media firm. You should leave my business unmolested. You should leave me at a minimum, एकदम touch and go sort of taxation. At the best तो है ना, आप मुझे टैक्सी मत करो. पण तू काय करतो? तू मला टॅक्स नका ना करू, मी जॉब्स क्रिएट करतो. मग Amazon का हिस्ट्री है since it started in 1995 till date that Amazon is a company which has been steadily losing jobs. और तरी बेशरम आदमी सारी दुनिया को जाके बोल के आएगा कि नहीं, it's only in the absence, it's only in the presence of light taxation that corporates would be in a way incentivized to create more jobs. तू कर कहाँ रहा है जॉब्स, वो तो दिखा. म्हणून सगळ्यात जास्त इंटरेस्ट जो आहे ना तो मीडिया फर्म्स मध्ये. आणि आपण काय करतो, रोज रात्री जाऊन टीव्ही बघतो. अर्णब गोस्वामी, अजून काय काय, आपल्याला चैन पडत नाही. आपल्याला वाटतं आपण जर टीव्ही बघितला नाही तर आपल्याला काय कळणारच नाहीये. पेपर वाचायला कष्ट पडतात ना, पेपर वाचणं हे कष्टप्रद काम आहे. टीव्ही बघणं म्हणजे कसं की सोपं आहे. बातम्या कठीण काय एकाच पद्धतीने बघतायत आणि दोन्ही आता एकाच लेवलला गेलेले आहेत. माइल्ड एंटरटेनमेंट, दॅट इज व्हॉट न्यूज इज ऑल अबाउट नाउ. हा काय म्हटला, मग ती त्याला काय म्हटली, मग तो तिला काय म्हटला. दिस आय एम सेइंग अबाउट द उत्तर प्रदेश इलेक्शन्स. There is not a single word of discussion about anything else other than that. And people stay hooked to it. Almost, it's like an addiction. This is how the firm creates situations which are patently undemocratic. This is how the firm, at the end of the day, steadily goes on corroding democracy. This is how the firm ultimately delivers, as a solution to a corroded democracy, a firm called as Trump. वो फर्म डेमोक्रेसी को करोड़ करता है और फर्म बाद में जाके आपको थ्रू द मीडिया आपके सामने ये पेश करता है ये इनएविटेबल है, आपके पास दूसरा ऑप्शन नहीं है. तो जोकर गेट्स इलेक्टेड एंड जोकर रन्स द वर्ल्ड. आ रहे समझ में? This is how interesting the whole thing is. अच्छा, was this always like this? The answer is no. म्हणजे एक झटका जो झालेला होता तो ॲट द स्टार्ट ऑफ द 20th century झाला, ज्याला थिओडोर रूझवेल्ट ट्राइड टू सॉर्ट ऑफ रीन इन द फर्म्स दॅट वर वर्किंग इन मोस्ट ऑफ दीज बिग इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर्स. There is something in the history of the United States as far as its economy is concerned which is called as the Gilded Age, which sort of is a 40-year-old period in the last part of the 19th century. You had these types of corporations which kept on becoming big. सो ते जस्ट कीप ऑन अक्युम्युलेटिंग थिंग्स ओव्हर अ पिरियड ऑफ टाईम. आणि त्यांना याचा काहीही प्रॉब्लेम नसतो की जसं से फॉर एक्झाम्पल यू हॅव पेटीएम किंवा यू हॅव स्नॅपडील अँड ऑल ऑफ दॅम. म्हणजे आपण ह्या वर्षी साधारणपणे 3,000 कोटी रुपयाचा तोटा झालेला आहे आपल्या उद्योगाला. आपल्याला थोडं तरी वाईट वाटतंय घ्यायचं, आपल्याला थोडं तरी याच्याबद्दल काही क्लेश किंवा आपल्या मनाला काही याची अनुभूती होतीये का, तर नाही. 3,000 कोटी रुपयाचा आपल्याला तोटा जरी झालेला असला तरी आपल्याला काही वाईट वाटत नाही. फॉर अ सिम्पल रिझन, कारण इफ आय गो बॅक टू द बँक्स आस्किंग देम फॉर मनी, दे वुड गिव्ह मी मनी. If they don't give me money, there's something called as the venture equity funds which will give me money. So त्यांच्याकडनं पैसे घेऊन यायचे, त्यांच्या पैसे जात बसायचं, लोकांना डिस्काउंट्स देत राहायचं with the idea that this is going to go about destroying what is called as a old business pattern and this would bring into existence a digital marketplace. म्हणजे इंडिया में ना इससे ज़्यादा नॉनसेंस किस्म का आइडिया ही एग्जिस्टेंस में नहीं है. या सगळ्या ज्या काही टाइमपास थुकराड फोन्स आहेत of the Flipkart variety, which believe that digital is the next horizon that you have to be interested in. Yeah, इतक्या useless, and the only reason why they are running all over the place is because they get money. Most of the time they get money from things within India. At times they get money from things outside India. You keep on burning money. All the business model is about burning money. You just steadily keep on burning money, with the idea that at some point of time or the other, what would happen is द ब्रिक एंड मॉर्टर वाला जो जगह है, जो एक फिजिकल स्पेस है, जो इन चीजों को वेंड कर रहा है, वो बंद हो जाएगा. और उसके बाद है ना, लोग बस डिजिटल आ जाएंगे और डिजिटल मार्केट प्लेसेस में खरीदेंगे. दिस हैज नॉट हैपेंड इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. दिस हैज नॉट हैपेंड इन यूरोप. दिस हैज नॉट हैपेंड इन आइदर चाइना और जापान. आई डोंट नो व्हाट बेसिस डू दे फील दैट दिस इज गोइंग टू हैपन इन इंडिया. इट्स अ गुड मॉडल इन टर्म्स ऑफ कंपेयरिंग प्राइसेस. It's a good model in terms of trying out something. It's not a good model in terms of compulsive buying, though that is exactly what they advertise. So if you look at most of their ads are about what is called as compulsive buying of the variety की तुम्हाला ज्या वेळेला असा विचार डोक्यात येईल की आपल्याला काहीतरी खरेदी करायचं आहे, instantly what you think of is a digital marketplace. That is not how India works. That is, for that matter of fact, not how anything in the world works. But they're living in a bubble. And they're living in a wonderful bubble. और इसके तमाम किस्म के जो कॉनोटेशंस है वो है कि ऐसे पैसे किन लोगों को मिल सकते हैं, ऐसे पैसे मिलने के जो कास्ट, क्लास, जेंडर वाले इश्यूज है वो एग्जैक्टली किस किस्म के हैं, सारे प्रॉब्लम्स है इसके साथ. बट दिस वाज नॉट द वे इन विच थिंग्स ऑलवेज हैपेंड. थिंग्स हैपेंड इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट वे. द ग्रेट डिप्रेशन ऑफ 1929 was a golden period in terms of what is called as regulating the functioning of the firm. Acha, most of these firms started off with an idea which said that we want to create something that is called as a public good. So मला एक रस्ता बांधायचा आहे, मला एक इथून तिथपर्यंत जाणारा पूल बांधायचा आहे, मला एक रेल्वे ट्रॅक बांधायचा आहे, मला एक हार्बर किंवा पोर्ट डेव्हलप करायचं आहे, माझ्याकडे आयडिया आहे, माझ्याकडे लोक आहेत who can do this for me. What I need is the state support to go ahead and do this. Most of that support was solicited in two forms. One is easy access to land and two is easy access to banking credit. But this was always about what is called as developing a public good. It was only much later on that what we started playing around with was we started dividing. Say for example, मी जर एक 4 लेन वाला रस्ता बांधला, तर त्या 4 लेन वाल्या रस्त्यामध्ये मी बांधताना आणि त्याच्यासाठी शासनाकडनं जमीन घेताना आय एम सेइंग दॅट दिस इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर द पब्लिक, दिस इज फॉर द गुड ऑफ द पब्लिक. देन आय स्लोली स्टार्ट आयडेंटिफाइंग पोर्शन्स ऑफ दिस रोड wherein there is a heavy traffic and wherein I can charge them money for the same. मग हळूहळू comes in an idea which says that for the better efficiency of this portion of the road कि जिधर ट्रैफिक ज्यादा है, I need to charge them for a certain amount of money. But again the idea is this is for the public good. की जर मी 4 लेन्स मध्ये एक अर्ध्या लेन मध्ये हे चार्ज करत असेल तर रिमेनिंग 3.5 लेन्स जो आहे ना, आय एम रनिंग देम फॉर फ्री. पण तुम्ही ना मला अर्ध्या लेन मध्ये चार्ज करूया. सो अथॉरिटीज गेव इन टू दॅट, सेइंग ओके ठीक है, ये अच्छा है. असं करत करत बाय द टाइम वी केम टू द एंड ऑफ द सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर, सडनली स्टार्टेड रियलाइजिंग वी आर पेइंग मनी ऑन ऑल द 4 लेन्स. चारों लेन्स पे पैसा दे रहे हैं. अच्छा, ये चारों लेन्स पे पैसा कलेक्ट करके फिर कर क्या रहा है इस पैसे का? So he's possibly developing something else. There came a point in the 1980s when most of the development was on paper and very notional. Well, it was not even happening in front of our eyes. It was happening in an intangential manner when we were promised that we are investing in Southeast Asia. This will benefit Southeast Asia. This will better trade relationships between them and us. This will sort of stabilize democratic regimes in those countries. So तुम्ही मला आहे ना स्वस्तामध्ये क्रेडिट आपल्या मार्केट्समधून उचलण्याची परवानगी दी. मुझे पता भी नहीं चला कि कब ये गेम went from being a public good, an argument for public good, a persistent argument for public good. If you look at most of the arguments which these firms made in the early part of the 20th century, the only major concern म्हणजे time and again ज्या फ्रिक्वेन्सीने आपल्याकडे आजच्या काळामध्ये विकास नावाचा शब्द उच्चारला जातो तेवढ्याच फ्रिक्वेन्सीने 20व्या शतकाच्या पूर्वार्धामध्ये अमेरिकेमध्ये पब्लिक गुड नावाचा शब्द उच्चारला जातो. की हा माझा आत्मा असा तिळतिळ का तुटतोय? पब्लिक गुड, विकास. लय नंतर कळायला लागलं की याच्यामध्ये लय मोठा डाव आहे. आणि डाव बेसिकली हा आहे की यू आर ॲक्सेसिंग द मार्केट फॉर चीप क्रेडिट, इझी क्रेडिट. यू आर गेटिंग अ होल रेंज ऑफ टॅक्स बेनिफिट्स फ्रॉम द गव्हर्नमेंट. यू आर इन्व्हेस्टिंग विच ऑन पेपर साउंड्स टू बी गुड but which possibly in reality is not even happening. But what is the impact of your investments outside? How do we assess it sitting back at home? You at the end of the day have got to trust us. You've got to trust the firm in terms of whatever it is doing. The firm was an aggregate of something that belongs to the era of industrial capitalism. Ki jitha the idea was for every single thing a consumer can't go to the market. You need a nodal agency which will go about deploying resources in as economized and efficient a manner as is possible. And that is what the firm was. की प्रत्येक गोष्टीसाठी कंझ्युमर मार्केटला नाही जाऊ शकत कारण प्रत्येक गोष्टीसाठी मार्केटला जात राहणं इज ॲट द एंड ऑफ द डे समथिंग दॅट इज नॉट गोइंग टू बेनिफिट हिम अँड इट पॉसिबली इज गोइंग टू बिकम अ लॉस मेकिंग वेंचर फॉर हिम. म्हणून व्हॉट यू नीड इज अ नोडल एजन्सी इन बिटवीन. द नोडल एजन्सी वॉज द फर्म. सगळ्या आर्ग्युमेंट्स तुम्हाला आज सांगितलं जातात ना त्या सगळ्या आर्ग्युमेंट्स कधी कधी तिकडे होऊन गेलेले आहेत. काही नवीन नाही आहे याच्यामध्ये. The United States has lived with its share of the Ajit Gulabchands, the Thakres, the संजय काकडेज. हे सगळे होऊन गेले आहेत आमच्याकडे. काय याच्यात नवीन नाहीये. हे सगळे टाइमपास होते. काय नाही करत. With regular frequency they'll keep on buying their Devendra Fadnavis who will do their bidding. After a point of time he would be disposed of and the show goes on. It was only when you started getting up to the fact that this is becoming threatening in the sense that ये खाली firm को threaten नहीं कर रहा है, ये state को threaten कर रहा है, तब जाके you started thinking in terms of इसको ring fence कैसे किया जाए. And the ring fencing मध्ये पण the idea is not to dismantle anything of this. The idea is to minimize the sort of damage that it can create to the communities outside this ring fence. We keep on coming. As I said, these laws on paper look absolutely stunning, very stunning. No reason was ever ascribed to this notion as to why does the government of India need a woman on every directorial board. मैंने कंपनीज जिनके प्रैक्टिसेस पेटेंटली गलत है, पेटेंटली पेट्रियार्कल है, उसमें एक औरत सिटिंग ऑन दिस बोर्ड ऑफ 15 मेंबर्स. रिमेंबर दैट 15 मेंबर्स एज फार एज मोस्ट ऑफ दीज बोर्ड्स आर कंसर्न्ड. सो ये 15 मेंबर के बोर्ड में वन वुमन, हाउ डज शी मेक अ डिफरेंस टू एनीथिंग? व्हाट इज दिस डिफरेंस दैट वी आर इमॅजिनिंग? वो काय आहे? ऑन पेपर तुम्ही जर त्या सगळ्या क्लासेस बघितले ना, देयर आर सम 480 क्लासेस टू इट. They all sound stunning, they all sound perfectly good. The only problem is there's just one agency that is supposed to go about vetting whether firms comply with each of these 480 clauses, which is SEBI. It's an overworked agency, it's an underappreciated agency, it's most of the time seen as a manipulating agency. अच्छा, SEC in the American case answers to the American Congress. SEBI in our case answers to the government. तो SEC का प्रॉपर एक पैनल डिपोजिशन होता है जिसमें SEC को कांग्रेस के मेंबर्स के सामने जाके अपने परफॉर्मेंस को एक्सप्लेन करना पड़ता है. मोस्ट ऑफ दीज हियरिंग्स आर पब्लिक हियरिंग्स. I don't know if you have heard of the sort of controversy that we had in Bombay between Fadnavis and Uddhav Thackeray in terms of corporation मध्ये टेंडरच्या मीटिंग्स ज्या होतात त्या एक्झॅक्टली कशा होतात. And Thackeray came up with this lovely idea which said that कॅबिनेटची मीटिंग होती ना महाराष्ट्र सरकारची, त्याच्यामध्ये तुम्ही पत्रकार बोलवा, तिला लाईव्ह टेलिवाइज करा, लेट द होल वर्ल्ड नो व्हॉट इज इट दॅट यू आर डुईंग, which is not very unusual from the American case. That's exactly what the Americans do. So या सगळ्या ज्या कॉंग्रेशनल हिअरिंग्स आहेत ना, जिथे या वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या गव्हर्नमेंट बॉडीज आन्सर टू द गव्हर्नमेंट, दे आन्सर टू द काँग्रेस, and most of them are televised hearings. So everyone knows for sure as to what is transacting between them. आ रहा है समझ में? So एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग, ऑन पेपर इट्स ऑल गुड, nobody has a problem with it. The problem is how do you deal with this when you have a single agency which is dealing with the entire thing. एक ऐसा agency which is significantly handicapped in terms of understanding as to how do firms work. Most of these firms do very funny things in the sense that, I don't know if you have heard about this, when you looked at the Tata business problem, Tata Sons ka managing authority is something called as Tata Trust. Tata Trust in most of the cases are charitable organizations. So याच्यातले सगळे ऑलमोस्ट सगळे ट्रस्ट जे आहेत ना, ते सगळे चॅरिटेबल ट्रस्ट आहेत. So they run these things like the TISS, TIFR, this Tata Cancer Institute. They go about running all of these places. These are some of India's most important institutions when it comes to dealing with a whole range of issues. Talk to people working in them, they are the best places to work in. You have ample amount of freedom and autonomy to pursue whatever you want to do. And ह्या firms जे आहेत ना, they control Tata Sons. Most of these firms are held and headed by the Tatas themselves. So what is the most important managing body as far as the Tata Group is concerned? The Tata Trust. So Tata Sons is supposed to be making money to run these charitable organizations. And the Tatas go about controlling the Tata Son board through something called the Tata Trust. हे इतकं अद्भुत मॉडल आहे ऑफ बिजनेस गवर्नमेंट, ऑफ बिजनेस गवर्नेंस, इसके जैसा मॉडल दुनिया में नहीं है. कि at both ends of the business sit the Tatas. One end of the business is what is known as a charitable business, something which has a larger public profile, as something that is more generous, more society oriented, and the sons are supposed to go about making money for them. So the sons end up being people who are stingy. Then the charity goes about in some way or the other suffering, and you go about using this to control the functioning of the sons. So brilliant, so impossibly brilliant. ह्या अशा ज्या बिझनेस प्रॅक्टिसेस आहेत ना, ह्याला एक्झॅक्टली समजून कसं घ्यायचं आणि ह्याला एक्झॅक्टली कंट्रोल कसं करायचं. कारण मोस्ट ऑफ द टाटा ट्रस्ट transact their business in perfect secrecy. These are not things which are open to anyone. You go about creating one company upon another. You go about creating a whole range of what are called as shell companies. एक organization is supposed to take care of all of this. How do you do that? And then all that you get are these types of petty issues in terms of नारायण मूर्तींना असं वाटलं की ते राजीव बन्सलचं जे सेव्हरन्स पॅकेज आहे ते खूपच, म्हणजे त्याला साधारणपणे 500-200 कोटी रुपये त्यांनी दिले. That created a problem for them. आता for someone who is departing from the firm, he is leaving, this is what is called as a severance package. You want him to keep quiet about a whole range of issues that he was in the know of when he was functioning as the CFO for you. This package essentially is about that. Once you have left this firm, you better keep quiet about everything that you knew of. Better keep quiet about it from the authorities. Better keep quiet about it from our business competitors. better keep quiet about it from a whole range of other stakeholders. So for all the efforts that the government of India tries to push in for, in terms of trying to promote something that is called as a culture of transparency and openness, what you find at the functioning end as far as Indian firms are concerned is a deep concern, a deep abiding concern for sort of veiling things in as many number of layers of secrecy as is possible. So हुकूमत अपनी तरफ से पूरी कोशिश कर रही है कि देखिए ये सब कुछ ओपन होना चाहिए, और ये बंदे अपनी तरफ से पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं in terms of wrapping it up in as many layers of secrecy as is possible. बरं सगळ्या लेवल्स ऑफ सिक्रेसी रिव्हील करण्याची जबाबदारी एकच संस्थेची, त्याला सभी असं म्हणतात. गरिबांनी कसं काम करावं? Are you getting it? And things become all the more difficult for a simple reason, because एक डिक्लाइनिंग किस्म का जो इकोनॉमिक क्लाइमेट है, जो स्टैग्नेंट है, मतलब there is something called as a certain level of stagflation and keeps on getting compounded with something called as jobless growth. तो ऐसा वाला सिचुएशन में how do you do all of this? The Tatas never had a problem so long as sons made money. Problem उस वक्त शुरू हो गया when the sons' capacity to make money sort of started getting moderated. जो पर्यंत पैसा बनतोय ना, जो पर्यंत it is sort of giving dividends, grand dividends to shareholders, they don't have any problem with it. The minute that goes in for a toss, सगळं सुरू होतं, सगळं. तो केपेबलच आहे का, हे बरोबरच आहे का, असं करायलाच पाहिजे का, सगळी असतील नसतील तेवढी सगळी उनी दोन्ही काढली जातात आणि धुतली जातात. So long as you are making money, that's exactly the problem. How long can you keep on making money? In a situation like India, when you have a whole range of these problems right in front of you, जॉबलेस ग्रोथ है, मार्केट पेनिट्रेशन लो है, स्टेट बिजनेस फ्रेंडली है पर मार्केट फ्रेंडली नहीं है. द मोदी गवर्नमेंट इज बिजनेस फ्रेंडली. द मोदी गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज मार्केट फ्रेंडली. मार्केट उसका दोस्त नहीं है, बिजनेस उसके दोस्त है. दिलीप सिंघवी, रतन टाटा, गौतम अडानी, मुकेश अंबानी हे आपले मित्र आहेत. Market. And then on top of everything, you have people like Trump and Theresa May to make things all the more difficult for you. $160 billion का IT सेक्टर है इंडिया का. $106 billion इसका एक्सपोर्ट्स है. $160 billion वाला सेक्टर है ना, इसका प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट्स $100 billion है. So more than 3/4 of it depends on what is called as the environment outside the country, which keeps on becoming hostile. सुषमा स्वराजला खूप वाईट वाटलं, भयानक वाईट वाटलं, कारण ते त्या हैदराबादच्या पोराला तिकडे त्यांनी गोळी मारली. मग खूप वाईट वाटलं. म्हणलं मोहम्मद अखलाक मेला त्यावेळेला नाही वाईट वाटलं. ज्याला हितं लोक मारली जात होती, आता कळतं का कि अपनों को खोने का दुख क्या होता है. हमारे अपने कौन थे? स्मार्ट पीपल कमिंग फ्रॉम इंडियाज अपर कास्ट who run America's IT sector. वो हमारे अपने हैं ना, we can sympathize and empathize with them. Akhlaq getting killed in Muzaffarnagar or Mohsin Sheikh getting killed in Solapur, I never heard Sushma Swaraj feeling bad about it. हे त्यावेळेला नाही ऐकलं ज्याला मोहसिन शेख मेला, हे त्यावेळेला नाही ऐकलं जेव्हा मोहम्मद अखलाक मेला, हे त्यावेळेला नाही ऐकलं जेव्हा रोहित वेमुला मेला. अजून पण बीजेपी मध्ये डिबेट चालू आहे की आपल्याला वाईट वाटलं पाहिजे की नाही वाईट वाटलं पाहिजे की रोहित वेमुला मेला. ते ह्याच्यावरती डिपेंडेंट आहे की रोहित वेमुला दलित होता का नव्हता. त्यावेळेला नाही वाईट, ह्याच्याबद्दल काही नाही वाईट वाटत. When an IT engineer gets killed in an American bar, undoubtedly it's tragic. Nobody has an issue with that. This is bad, it's very lousy. पण आम्हाला लय वाईट वाटलं. म्हटलं वा, किती छान ना. Nuanced degrees of pain. You had people being killed in this country. You never tweeted this, कि I feel so wrong and bad about this. IT engineer gets killed and you start feeling bad. Lovely. There are hierarchies of pain over here. So गरीब मुसलमान मरे, वेल उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. मिडिल क्लास इंडियन सॉफ्टवेयर वाला मरे, बहुत दुख की बात है, बहुत दुख की. You have a hostile global environment in which you are operating. One of the most important sectors of your economy. आप लाख चीजों को यहां बदलो, कुछ तो है जो बाहर है जो इस सारी चीज को अफेक्ट करने वाला है. So how would you work with that? Are you getting it? I hope like this is going somewhere in the sense कि like किस हद तक इसको पुश किया जाए और किस हद तक इसको समझा जाए. So in the sectors of the economy which are the worst governed, which have the worst records, they have the most drive when it comes to politics. If India's future are its cities, if the Indian future is going to happen in its cities, if cities are about what is called as real estate development, but if firms related to it have the worst corporate governance records, with this I submit for this period. I would come back to this at some later point of time. So फिर से एक बार we would go back to firms, फिर से एक बार we would go back to understanding as to how this sort of model work, because we have so many other examples to talk of, especially in this case वो जो American problem है as to how does one deal with someone known as Trump, who on one hand is executive president of the United States, who on the other hand refuses to let go of his business interests. So ऐसा वाला situation में this close sort of a overlap between the two, how does one deal with that? Why are firms so desperate to, they have always, as I said, been lobbying with government. At no point of time did they ever stop lobbying with government. So this idea that there is some sort of capitalism which is independent from the state, जिसका state के साथ कोई रिश्ता नहीं है. So capitalism, a well-functioning capitalist system is almost in a certain way an antithesis to something called as a state. There never was such a thing in existence. Never. There never would be one in existence. So we'll keep coming back to it because most of these issues are not going to go anywhere. They're going to keep on happening again and again and again. So we'll keep on talking about them at different points of time in terms of ये exactly काम कैसे करता है. आ रहा है समझ में? And especially तो जो CSR वाला issue है ना, that's a very interesting issue that needs to be focused on, because that's one way by which the Indian state believes that the development activities of the Indian state can be supplemented by India's private sector. So they're not saying that we are giving up on this, but what they're saying is this is inadequate as of now. So what the state is able to deliver, especially in terms of social welfare and benefits, there's a certain sort of a limitation to it. So आइडिया ये है कि CSR एक तरह से इन सारी चीजों को सप्लीमेंट करता जाएगा. उन CSR का एक प्रॉब्लम, जैसे मैंने कहा है, आज तक की तारीख में जब से वो ऑपरेट हो रहा है तब से उसका परमानेंट रिकॉर्ड ये है, दे आर चेरी पिकिंग ऑन थिंग्स. दे जस्ट पिक अप थिंग्स व्हिच आर ऑफ इंटरेस्ट टू देम एज फार एज द लॉन्ग टर्म इज कंसर्न्ड. द आजम प्रेम जी केस जो मैंने आपसे कहा, वो तो इतना, ऑफ कोर्स इट्स अ वंडरफुल प्लेस, आई डोंट हैव अ प्रॉब्लम विद इट, इट्स अ रियली वंडरफुल प्लेस. But in terms of the sort of linkages which it is establishing, it's really something that needs to be thought about. कि जहाँ a firm like this goes about functioning in the domain of education research, कारण इंडिया का एक सगळ्यात permanent problem जो आहे is quality data in terms of education indicators. कि midday meal schemes, do they really work in terms of improving enrollment? What role does enrollment play in terms of educational outcomes and attainments? So we yet have paucity of data when it comes to all of this. So as a case में a firm like this plays a very significant role. The one thing that needs to be understood is if you have that intimate a linkage, आपका data जो generate किया जा रहा है उसका noise जो है आप उसको moderate कैसे करोगे? So I don't know. As I said, these are very interesting questions to keep on thinking about. These are very interesting questions to keep on debating about. And that's the reason why we'll go back to them again. So this is just one, I just wanted to get introduced to this. And that's the reason why I pitched it at this level. आगे जाके we'll keep on making this more complex. Okay? So आता तुम्ही बोला. हाँ go on, any one of you, बोल.
It was very clear from the previous government's policies that they have taken India as a emerging market economy. So they have taken decisions in that favor. But sir, today the scenario is completely different. They are taking the bold decisions and they are not actually getting the facts that where we lie today. It's the emerging market economy or it's the developed economy. Because the decisions this government is taking like demonetization and all these things.
Like?
Demonetization.
हाँ.
All the economic policies they are talking about. So here we are actually, sir, it's the developed economy or...
No. India is not a developed economy. Whoever gave you that wrong impression. We have miles to travel. Miles. Literally miles. I'll give you an example. The United States has a per capita per annum income. Okay? Which almost is in the range of something like $58,000. The Chinese have a per capita which is in the range of something like $7,000 to $8,000. The Indian per capita, the Chinese one is at $15,000. The Indian one is somewhere around $3,000. India is what is called as a lower middle income economy. So वो in terms of these per capita income के जो figures होते हैं उसके हिसाब से वो एक lower middle income economy है. The Chinese are roughly seen as a middle income economy and Americans and all the Western countries put together would always be seen as a developed economies. So developed का basic idea क्या है कि you should have enough financial assets which would make you free to take certain range of decisions at your own end and never be in this problem that what exactly would be the consequences of these decisions. So if you look at the development of, say for example, the United States and the Western firms, एक stage था when they were seriously worried about this in terms of कि आज आपण जे करतोय त्याचे उद्या exactly परिणाम काय होणार. But by the time you come to the 1970s, we are free of that. We are no longer worried about anything. We are not worried about destitution. We are not worried about this. कि आपण असा जे आपल्याला normally maybe तुमच्या वयामधल्या लोकांना who are earning and all of that would always be told as of now in a country like India की असा वायफळ खर्च करू नये कारण आपण जर असे वायफळ खर्च केले तर आपल्याकडं पुढं गेल्याच्या नंतर ज्याला आपण म्हातारे होऊ ज्याला आपल्याला पैशाची गरज असेल त्याला आपल्याकडे पैसे नसणार आहेत म्हणून कसं बेताबेतानी खर्च करावं. हां सो वो वाले जो सारे इश्यूज है ना दे गॉट रिजॉल्व्ड as far as the West is concerned with the coming in of what are called as the Western welfare states. So once you had welfare coming in paid by public money with an idea that public money is what is going to pay for welfare. तुम भूखे नहीं जाओगे, तुमको जब तुम बीमार पड़ोगे तो तुम्हारा कंडीशन ऐसे नहीं होगा कि तुमको ट्रीटमेंट के बारे में सोचना पड़ रहा है और शायद तुमको अच्छा ट्रीटमेंट नहीं मिल रहा है. Getting it? So that sort of freed them from a certain range of concerns. And this is how the state sort of projected itself in the lives of the common people. And त्याच्यानंतर मग you could progressively keep on taking as many number of risks as is possible. So when you are talking about development, as far as these people are concerned, we are essentially looking at something की याच्यामध्ये it comes coupled with a certain idea of freedom. आपल्या केसमध्ये तर ते लांब पर्यंत शक्य नाहीये. At $3,000 you are hardly anywhere. You are not even on the horizon. For all manner of purposes of investments, which are investment decisions which are made by Western investment firms, India is classified as what is called as an emerging market economy. पण हे emerging market economy असलेली जी आयडिया आहे ती strictly is from the perspective of something that is called as financial investments. This is not about anything else. Emerging market economies नावाचा जो टॅग आहे किंवा नावाची जी कॅटेगरी आहे त्याच्यामध्ये you will get diverse countries from things like Mexico, Brazil, Turkey to something like India. Now that doesn't mean that we all have certain things in common. It all means that from the perspective of the Western investment firms, we are equally interesting when it comes to taking investment decisions. When we are not a developed economy, by any stretch of the imagination, we are not a developed economy. आणि कदाचित माझ्या आयुष्यात तर होणार नाहीये, तुमच्या आयुष्यातही होईल याच्याबद्दल मला फार डाऊट आहे. I'm very sorry about that, but I really can't think of a better way of categorizing it. But I hope that you get this. Emerging market economy is a tag which you would use only for investment purposes. And developed economy normally comes up with what is called as criteria of per capita income, and in consonance with it, a whole set of criteria which are related to human development.
Second question is about political agenda of this current government. It's clear that it's projecting state-dominated agenda that actually converges with its very base on which it has formed in 1920s, that is Janasangha. So they have projected at the start. They had projected the Nehruvian policy. They have opposed the Nehruvian policy, where they have opposed the first 5-year plan of Nehru.
They opposed all the 5-year plans.
Exactly. So it actually converges with that idea. So what can be done with this?
No, my simple submission is this, that
Question is that can we afford as a 125 crore nation where 40% people are below poverty line? So projecting the state-dominated agenda. So can we actually afford it?
state-dominated agenda. आता है look, there are two ways by which I would like to approach this issue. The first way is about your concern that this government is about what is called as centralizing the state. And this is not about taking the state out of economic or social affairs. Okay? And त्या अर्थाने this is Nehruvianism without Nehru. So the way by which you can classify it is like this is Nehruvianism without Nehru in it. So the sort of idea that Nehru had of a strong state that would go about marshalling all necessary resources for the development of the peoples of India, for pulling them out of poverty, for doing all of this. I don't know, that's like a debate that we can have till kingdom come in terms of was Nehruvianism in the time of Nehru right or wrong? So एक जो डिबेट है वो ये है कि नेहरूवियनिज्म नेहरू के वक्त पे सही था या गलत था, और एक जो डिबेट है वो इस बारे में है कि नेहरूवियनिज्म पोस्ट नेहरू सही है या गलत है, एंड हाउ डू यू लुक एट बोथ दीज इश्यूज. So one way of insisting on this that possibly what Nehru did was right because it was in sync with the times that we find ourselves in at the end of the Second World War. So if, say for example, even the world's most developed countries, then what India was in 1947, in the 1940s were talking about what is called as a strong role for the state. So 1961 Modi, you'll have President Eisenhower stepping down from power after 2 consecutive terms as President of the United States, giving a fabulous interview talking about something called the military-industrial complex. Okay, so some sort of idea that underpins the functioning of the American economy and the American state. कि ज्याच्यामध्ये American industry and the American military are part of a conjoint complex. So if Eisenhower in 1961, while stepping down, could speak about the fact that the American state has always been at the forefront in terms of pushing for the American economy, तो हम जैसे लोगों का तो औकात ही नहीं है ना इस चीज़ के सामने. So one was this Western model which was championed by the United States. A second was a model which was championed by the Soviet Union. दोनों cases में the state was strongly and dominantly present all over the place. So शायद Nehru in the Nehruvian times was not wrong. The problem starts much later on when sort of by the time you come to the 1960s, you are not just dealing with a strong state, you are possibly also dealing with a very corrupt state. So your problem is that we are not just dealing with something that is strong. The state is not just strong at the level of its processes and its institutions, but the state possibly is also corrupt and fallible. It possibly is now becoming what is called as a rent-seeking state. It's no longer interested in the sort of public welfare thing that the Nehru government was talking about in the initial days when we became free from the British. And then starts off this whole problem that will occupy our minds till almost the coming of the 1980s, कि सबसे बड़ा problem आपका जो है is how do you stop the state from becoming a rent-seeking state. Then comes in a perspective which says this that Nehruvianism शायद नेहरू के टाइम्स के लिए ठीक था, Nehruvianism शायद पोस्ट नेहरू टाइम्स के लिए ठीक नहीं है. So for almost 60 years after independence, 50 years after independence, you lived with a strong and a powerful state. But in terms of the way in which it was supposed to go about molding, changing and transforming things, there was a certain limitation to it. The 1980s तो would open up with a whole range of problems कि जिसमें बार बार ये point out किया जाएगा कि शायद state उतना जो neutral और objective होना चाहिए नहीं है, कि आपका poverty का issues resolve ही नहीं हुआ है, आप अभी भी गरीब हो, आप बहुत ज़्यादा गरीब हो, आपके जस्टिस और सोसाइटी से रिलेटेड मामले जो है वो नहीं रिजॉल्व हुए, आपका स्टेट ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव नहीं है क्योंकि आपका स्टेट इंक्लूजनरी नहीं है, वो एक्सक्लूजनरी स्टेट है, वो बार बार लोगों को एक्सक्लूड करता है। 80s विल कम विद मंडल, 90s विल बिगिन विद द सुप्रीम कोर्ट का इंदिरा सानी जजमेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग, आइडेंटिफाइंग एंड सेंट्रलाइजिंग दिस प्रॉब्लम that there's something called as caste in India, and the state has possibly played a very wrong role when it comes to taking cognizance of all these issues. So post 1990s, your issue is that possibly what needs to be done is this rent-seeking state needs to be dismantled. So what you're going for is privatization, what you're going for is liberalization and globalization, with the idea that this is going to benefit the people of India. So one model of state-centered, state-led development is what we have lived with. That has possibly not functioned well and has possibly not given you much. So what you need to do is try out another model. Of course, I'm just for sake of brevity trying to cut things short. हे इतकं सोपं नव्हतं, ह्याच्यामध्ये अनेक प्रकारचे nuances आणि अनेक प्रकारचे problems आणि अनेक प्रकारचे twists and turns आहेत. And this is what we came to in the 1990s, saying that what we need to do is dismantle the Indian state in terms of its preponderant role in the economy and the society of India. पण ते सगळे जे रिफॉर्म्स होते जे पोस्ट 1991 झाले ते कंटिन्युअसली वर ऑफ अ टाईप ऑफ 2 पावलं पुढे टाकलेली आहे तर जवळजवळ 3.5 पावलं मागे टाकलेली. दोन पावलं पुढे जातो आणि थोड्या वेळी परत फिरून येतो, 3.5 पावलं मागे येऊन परत मागं तिथं जाऊन उभा राहतो. So this is not about the present government. This is about all the governments before that. So 1991 से लेके 2014 तक, when the present government came to power, you had almost 23 years of economic reforms. ज्याच्यामध्ये you had all manner of governments before this government. हर एक का record क्या है in terms of liberalizing the economy? हर एक का record is until and unless it doesn't become really inevitable, don't do anything. अगदीच काही सगळे पर्याय संपलेले आहेत, टाळताच येत नाही, मग काहीतरी करा. So are you really interested in liberalizing? अच्छा, liberalizing करेगा क्या? This is an ideal situation which I am talking of. In the Indian practice, it's not going to work. We know that. Liberalizing is supposed to go about placing the ownership and the conduct of a whole range of resources and assets in the hands of the people of India. As I said, this is the ideal. ये practically नहीं होता है, नहीं होगा, नहीं हो रहा है. पर ये उम्मीद है कि ये करेगा क्या, कि ये जो सारे assets है, ये जो सारे resources है, which are necessary to develop the people of India, this would be placed at the disposal of the people of India. You take charge of this, you run this in your own interest, to your own benefits. प्रॉब्लेम तिथंच आहे ना, हे असं जर केलं तर स्टेटचं काय होणार? It has to be reversed. Liberalization essentially is about that. The Gandhi-Nehru model did not result in substantive cuts when it comes to the levels of poverty in India. We lived with poverty, we lived with hunger, we lived with disease, disaster, want, everything. So the idea is वो model नहीं काम कर रहा है. You need a new model. And the new model is you place all of this in the hands of the people of India and let them run it for their own benefits. As I said, ये ideal है, ये practical नहीं है. पर ideal में भी problem ये है कि अगर आप ऐसा करोगे तो state क्या करेगी? A state which has got attuned to the fact that it has to play a role in shaping your lives and destinies. it suddenly becomes jobless. आणि इंडियन स्टेट तो खूपच सुंदर आहे ना. तू काय खातोय, तुला काय करायचंय, मला करायचंय कारण मी स्टेट आहे. तू काय खातोय, तू काय बघतोय, तू कुणाबरोबर चाललाय, ते केरळवाली व्हॅलेंटाईन्स डे केस. मी कोण आहे, मी पोलीस, इंडियन स्टेट. तुला करायचं काय, मी कुणाबरोबर चाललोय. पण स्टेटला एक्झॅक्टली हे सगळे अशा सगळ्या प्रकारचे कन्सर्न्स. तुम्ही काय खाता, तुम्ही काय पिता, तुम्ही अंगावर काय कपडे घालता, तुम्ही कुठं जाता, तुम्ही काय बघता, तुम्ही काय वाचता, तुला दुसरी कामं नाही आहेत, पण ही सगळ्यात महत्वाची कामं आहेत. और इसका जो ताल्लुक है ना, ये सारी जो एक्टिविटी स्टेट की है, इसका ताल्लुक इज विद समथिंग कॉल्ड एज वी आर अ टॉप डाउन नेशन. We are essentially a nation कि जिसमें the state has always played a pivotal role in terms of shaping, molding and transforming us towards what is called as a national consciousness. It सगळं लफडं goes to that. They had one idea and one pattern in terms of the non-BJP people as to what do we mean by developing national consciousness and what is the Indian nation all about. The BJP has a different idea about what exactly is the Indian nation all about. In दोन्हीच्या केसमध्ये the way by which the nation can be realized on the ground is through the agency of the state and through what I would always refer to the coercive agency of the state. कशी जाणार स्टेट? ह्यांना तर त्यांच्यापेक्षा जास्त इंटरेस्ट आहे. ते काँग्रेसवाले एक नंबरचे लुच्चे आणि हरामखोर मानतात की त्यांना ह्याच्यामध्ये काही इंटरेस्ट नसतो. नाही, ह्याच्यामध्ये इंटरेस्ट आहे की त्यांना ह्याच्यात काही घेणं देणं नाही. तू काय खातो, काय पितो, तुझ्या खिशात किती पैसे आहेत, त्याच्यामध्ये त्यांना सगळ्यात जास्त फंडामेंटल इंटरेस्ट आहे. आणि तसे ते सेक्युलर आहेत. त्यामुळे तुझ्या खिशात 1000 रुपये असले तरी तो चोरी करणार, तुझ्या खिशात 10 रुपये असले तरी तो डाल लावणार. पण यांना काय परमनंट इंटरेस्ट कसं, ते काय खातो, काय पितो, कुणाशी बोलतो, सगळा प्रॉब्लेम तो. We have never in this country believed in this, that the people of India at their own level are capable of developing a sense of nationalism. We have permanently lived with this notion that the Indian state is a nanny to Indians when it comes to developing this sense of nationalism. वो हमारी imported nanny है, which has got to tutor us, which has got to permanently mentor us. आता जनगण मन लागलं, आता उठा, उभे राहा, आता वंदे मातरम लागला, आता बसा. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया. तू उठतो का? नाही, मी नाही उठणार. मी नानी आहे का नाही? तुम्ही उठायचं. आज नानी आय वॉन्ट टू टेल यू की तुम्ही उठायचं कधी आणि बसायचं कधी. मी नाही उठायचं. नानी कधी उठती का? म्हणून मी मागाशी जे म्हटलं ना, ते एकदम खरं आहे. आपण इमर्जिंग, डेव्हलप, आपण नॉनसेन्स आहे, बाकी काही नाही. आपण एक लय ग्रँड नॉनसेन्स आहे. मग सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया, सुप्रीम कोर्ट सिटिंग विथ क्लोज टू 3 million cases in the docket has time for things like these. की वंदे मातरम किती म्हणावं, कधी म्हणावं, डॉक्युमेंटरीचं मध्ये आलं तर काय करावं, जनगण म्हणतं काय करावं, तुला काम नाही येत का? हेच काम आपलं. The organs of the Indian state have always believed in this, strongly believed in it. Their fundamental reason to exist is to help foster a sense of nationalism. Beyond that, it's debatable as to what is the essence of that sense of nationalism.
Actually, being a top-down nation is a disadvantage.
It is, it always has been. No country has ever become a top-down nation. Successful nations are always about bottoms up. It's never about top-down.
So it's some CSR. Some people are arguing that CSR should be voluntary, while as a compulsion would defeat its spirit. There, I think compulsion is that there is no point in making CSR. That's what.
It's true. मतलब if you leave firms to take their own call on what exactly should they be doing, they are not going to do anything. CSR in our case becomes meaningful precisely because it is obligatory. तुम वो ऑब्लिगेशन या मैंडेशन वाला अगर किस्सा उससे निकाल दो ना, तो वो कुछ नहीं करने वाले हैं. आपने उनसे अगर कहा ना कि तुम वॉलंटरीली कुछ करो, क्यों करेगा? अरे फर्म का पर्पस सोशल वेलफेयर थोड़ी ना है. फर्म का पर्पस इज मैक्सिमाइजिंग प्रॉफिट as far as its multiple shareholders are concerned. ये प्राइमरी फंक्शन है. ये बाकी सारे जो फंक्शन है ना, ये सॉर्ट ऑफ वॉलंटरी है. ये लिए एक्सेप्ट किए तो किए, ना किए तो ना किए. पर हमारी केस में दूसरा प्रॉब्लम क्या था कि there were entire sections which were newly getting developed. Let's take CSR and understand it very clearly in the case of most of the mining industries which are operating in the tribal areas of India. गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का परमानेंट प्रॉब्लम ये था कि गवर्नमेंट लाइसेंस दे के इन लोगों को उन एरियाज में ऑपरेशन का परमिशन दे रहा था. इस परवाने को देने के बाद इनका प्रॉब्लम ये था कि द गवर्नमेंट वाज नॉट इन द प्रोसेस, नॉट इन अ पोजीशन टू कंट्रोल द सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्सप्लॉयटेटिव एक्टिविटीज व्हिच दे आर डूइंग ऑन द ग्राउंड. सो इट हैड टू कम अप विद समथिंग लाइक दिस कि वी मेक दिस ऑब्लिगेटरी, डिस्क्लोज दिस कि आपने अंडर CSR इस साल में क्या क्या किया. आणि त्याचे पण नॉर्म्स आहेत, त्याचे अत्यंत डिटेल्ड नॉर्म्स आहेत की तुम्ही ते कशा पद्धतीने ते पैसे खर्च करू शकता, ते तुम्ही कशामध्ये गुंतवायचे आहेत, त्याचे रेकॉर्ड्स कसे मेंटेन करायचे, त्याचे तुम्ही मेंटेन केलेले रेकॉर्ड्स व्हेरीफाय आणि ऑडिट कसे करायचे, त्याचे पण सगळे नॉर्म्स आहेत. पण फॉर द बेस्ट ऑफ थिंग्स दॅट यू कॅन थिंक ऑफ, द इंडियन फर्म्स हॅव फाउंड अ वे ऑफ हाऊ डू यू सर्कमवेंट ऑल ऑफ दिस, विच इज द सॅडेस्ट पार्ट ऑफ द एंटायर स्टोरी. तुम्ही इतक्या चतुरपणे या सगळ्यातनं मार्ग बाहेर काढलेला आहे, इतक्या व्यवस्थितपणे. मी तुम्ही जर CSRचे डिटेल्स बघितले ना, तर ॲज अ स्मॉल फर्म यू वुड नेवर पॉसिबली थिंक इन टर्म्स ऑफ एक्सपॅन्डिंग द फर्म. CSR कॅन ॲक्ट ऑलमोस्ट एज अ सिरियस डेटरंट टू दॅट. आणि तरी दीज पीपल हॅव डेव्हलप्ड सिस्टमॅटिक नॉर्म्स इन टर्म्स ऑफ हाऊ डू यू सर्कमवेंट ऑल ऑफ दिस. पण इफ यू से कि वॉलंटरी कर दो और मैंडेशन इसका निकाल लो, वो कुछ नहीं करने वाले. बिलीव एंड ट्रस्ट में वो कुछ भी नहीं करने. कारण CSRची एक सगळ्यात महत्त्वाची गंमत काय माहिती का, अटलीस्ट ॲज फार एज द शेअर होल्डर्स ऑफ द फर्म आर कन्सर्न, अगेन द रिटेल शेअर होल्डर्स, की ऑन अकाउंट ऑफ द फॅक्ट द कंपनी इज फाइलिंग अप विथ सेबी इन टर्म्स ऑफ व्हॉट हॅज इट गॉन अबाउट डुईंग आणि त्याची व्हॅल्यू. सो मोस्ट शेअर होल्डर्स ओके get to come to know in a much more better way कि इस फर्म का एग्जैक्ट वैल्यूएशन क्या है. जर 2% म्हणजे एवढे पैसे जर का तू खर्च केले असतील तर तुझी एक्झॅक्ट व्हॅल्युएशन किती आहे. तो CSR डेटा बिकम्स क्वाइट इंटरेस्टिंग फॉर होल रेंज ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स इन टर्म्स ऑफ एक्चुअली वेरीफाइंग एंड डिटरमाइनिंग द वैल्यू ऑफ द फर्म. मग पता नहीं, पण टू गो बैक टू योर क्वेश्चन, इफ यू से दैट दिस शुड बी वॉलंटरी, यू फॉरगेट दैट दे आर गोइंग टू डू, सिंपली फॉरगेट इट. दे आर नॉट केपेबल ऑफ दैट.
So this is about ethics in corporate governance. The major point of standoff between Murthy and Sikka was appointment of Punita Sinha as the direct independent director, wife of Jain Sinha. So how do we look at it in a subjective manner as the emerging corporate governance? So like Vishal Sikka is arguing that she is competent, she has been an investment banker, so I am taking her in. But then Murthy is saying that no. So how do we?
No, I don't know. I don't want to cherry pick things for a simple reason because it's about a whole range of issues. याच्याबद्दल काहीच प्रश्न नाही आहे. You can't be appointing anyone as a director, anyone as an independent director, who in her position as an independent director has a certain sort of a role in terms of influencing the very pattern of business flow as far as the firm is concerned. So उसके बारे में तो कोई डाउट नहीं है कि हम इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर के नाम पे ऐसे डायरेक्टर को डेफिनेटली अपॉइंट नहीं कर सकते हैं कि जो आपका बिजनेस पैटर्न जो है उसको एक तरह से इन्फ्लुएंस कर सके. ओके. Now, with anyone coming from government and with anyone associated with the bureaucracy, in whatever capacity they are, to believe in this that being his wife, she is independent, oh well, that's quite a lot to imagine. So there's no doubt about this. And ideally enough, in a country wherein you have so much amount of talent which is available, I think CEOs should abstain from going in for these types of controversies because these are needlessly deviationary things. इसका कोई इम्पैक्ट नहीं है. ये एक तरह से बहुत ही नीडलेस किस्म का प्रॉब्लम है. आपको एट द एंड ऑफ द डे इसके बारे में सोचना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि आप एक इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर के तौर पे जिसको लाने वाले हो वो आपके फर्म के जो माइनॉरिटी शेयर होल्डर्स हैं उनमें कितना कॉन्फिडेंस इंस्पायर कर सकते हैं दैट शी इज गोइंग टू एक्ट इन द बेस्ट इंटरेस्ट ऑफ देम. So that as a CEO is what you should be primarily concerned with. Because the more she can inspire this, the more it can sort of drive up the firm's bottom lines in terms of investment decisions which are made. So to believe in this कि just because of the fact that she is somebody's wife and that sort of suits you well, तो एक problem आहे, तो permanent problem है कि why are they interested in appointing people like that? कारण इंडिपेंडेंट जो डिरेक्टर आहे ना त्याचा प्रायमरी कन्सर्न जो आहे तो बेसिकली मायनॉरिटी शेअर होल्डर्सच्या बाबतीत आहे की तुम्ही त्यांना काय पद्धतीने या गोष्टीसाठी इन्स्पायर करू शकता की दिस इज गुड इनफ फॉर. पण इफ दॅट इज नॉट पॉसिबल आय सी नो रिझन वाय यू शुड गो अहेड विथ एनी सच अपॉइंटमेंट.
So market firms driving or maneuvering the politics or the economic policies of the country, is it evident? It is inevitable in times of liberalized, globalized world, and so as I associate it with the funding which goes on in the. What I noticed, I associate it with funding with firms financing parties to win elections, and they giving in power when they get the power, they give it to the firms. So can the degree of interference may vary, but it is evident from time to time. Can state funding be a possible solution to curtail the problem?
तुला गंमत मला सांग ना, मी तुला सांगतो. The Election Commission of India has a database. भारत में 1900 पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज हैं रजिस्टर्ड विद द इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया. 1900. Of these, at some point of time or the other, it's only 500 parties which have contested elections. 1400 parties have never contested any elections. Sorry, I think it's 400 parties and 1500 parties. So 1500 parties which have never contested any elections. मुख्य मुद्दा काय आहे की ह्या 1500 पार्टीज ज्या कधीही एकाही निवडणुकीला उभ्या राहिलेल्या नाहीत, यांनी इलेक्शन कमिशन ऑफ इंडियाकडे स्वतःची नोंद पॉलिटिकल पार्टी म्हणून का केलेली आहे? तर तुमचा जो पीपल्स रिप्रेझेंटेशन ऍक्ट आहे त्याच्या अंतर्गत एनी ऑर्गनायझेशन विच इज रजिस्टर्ड विथ द इलेक्शन कमिशन ऑफ इंडिया ॲज अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी, when it comes to gathering funds, okay, when it comes to garnering revenues, has a certain tax-free status. Well, the sole reason why these 1500 parties are in existence is precisely because they can sort of go about gathering funds. Most of the time they are not interested in that. Most of the time what they are more interested in is जिस किस्म का पैसा आप बना रहे हो आपकी दूसरी एक्टिविटीज से, इस पैसे को आप लीगलाइज और लेजिटिमाइज कैसे करो. तो हे जे 1500 लोक आहेत ना, हे कुणाकडून कुठलेही पैसे घ्यायला जात नाही. आपले काहीतरी तिसरेच धंदे आहेत, त्याच्यातनं आपले पैसे येत आहेत, ते आपण कागदोपत्री ह्या पार्टीत सरकवले असं दाखवतोय आणि ते पार्टीच्या कार्यासाठी बँकेकडनं जाऊन ते परत विड्रॉ करायचे आणि ते परत रेग्युलरली वापरत आणायचे. सो मोस्ट ऑफ दीज parties are actually acting as vehicles for laundering money. Okay, keep aside these 1500. There are 400 that are contesting elections. How do we decide that these 400 receive what amount of money from the public exchequer? So public funding of elections is a good enough idea. आता ठरवायचं कसं की या 400 लोकांना किती प्रमाणात पैसे द्यायचे? सगळ्यांना सारख्याच प्रमाणात पैसे द्यायचे का? सगळ्यांना UBI सारखं करायचं का? प्रत्येकाला 7,000 वर्षाला? पण विच इज रॉंग. काही पार्टीज क्षेत्रीय पार्टीज आहेत, काही पार्टीज उपक्षेत्रीय पार्टीज आहेत. पहिल्या कॅटेगरीत शिवसेना मोडते, दुसऱ्या कॅटेगरीत राष्ट्रवादी काँग्रेस मोडते. सो अशा पार्टीजचा फंडिंगच्या बाबतीत कसा विचार करायचा? सगळ्यांना तुम्ही एकसारखे पैसे नाही देऊ शकत. मग तुम्ही पैसे स्टॅगर करत देणार म्हणजे एक्झॅक्टली कुणाला किती पैसे देणार? बरं, यू हॅव मॉडेल्स ऑफ पब्लिक फंडिंग विच इज अवेलेबल. फॉर एक्झाम्पल, इफ यू कॅन लुक ॲट द युरोपियन कंट्रीज, तुला ह्या इलेक्शनमध्ये काय परफॉर्मन्स आहे याच्या बेसिसवरती तुला पुढच्या इलेक्शनमध्ये किती द्यायचे आम्ही ठरवतो. पण भारतामध्ये युअर कंडक्ट, युअर परफॉर्मन्स ॲज फार एज इलेक्शन इज कन्सर्न्ड हा वेगवेगळ्या कारणास्तव वेगवेगळा असू शकतो. तुम्ही काय ठरवणार, तुम्ही किती मतं पडली याला तुम्ही फंडिंग देणार का किती सीटं पडली याला तुम्ही फंडिंग देणार. हाऊ आर गोइंग टू डिवाइड दिस? ओके, forget the other issue कि what is good is the Indian model in the sense that it sees to it that the people have a certain sort of genuine concern, stay invested in the conduct of politics. म्हणजे असल्या कॉर्पोरेशन सारखे इलेक्शन, कॉर्पोरेशन तर सोडूनच द्या. म्हणजे ॲज फार एज अन ॲव्हरेज अमेरिकन इज कन्सर्न यू वुड फाइंड इट डिफिकल्ट फॉर हिम टू गेट हिम इंटरेस्टेड इवन इन अ नॅशनल इलेक्शन. पण तुम्ही जर काल पुण्यामध्ये कुठेही फिरत असता किंवा पिंपरी चिंचवडमध्ये किंवा मुंबईमध्ये, यू वुड फाइंड पीपल हू आर डीपली इंटरेस्टेड इन दिस. काय झालं, कोण आलं, कुणाला किती पडले. वो जो पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट है ना, that is the force that legitimizes the conduct of this politics. If you say the state funds all of this and throws everyone out, बरं अब भी जैसे मैंने उससे कहा स्टेट का प्रॉब्लम ये है कि आपका स्टेट का एक कैरेक्टराइजेशन है, आपका स्टेट पेट्रियार्कल है, आपका स्टेट कास्टिस्ट है, आपका स्टेट इन सर्टन में हिंदुत्ववादी है. अगर आप ये कहोगे कि ऐसा स्टेट इलेक्शंस को फंड करेगा तो ऐसे लोग जो इन कैटेगरीज में आते ही नहीं है त्यांना तर पैसेच मिळणार नाहीत. मग कसं करायचं. म्हणून मग सेफ इनफ काय आहे की वेन यू हॅव द सॉर्ट ऑफ फंडिंग पॅटर्न दॅट यू ॲज ऑफ नाव हॅव, you have companies, you have firms, but at the same time you also have common average people who are interested in it, who find money for it, who run and who contest for offices, who get elected, help benefiting each other. ठीक है ना, there's no problem with that, but that essentially means that this becomes a democracy which can be run by the people. So there's a genuine public interest in it, but if you take that out, I don't know how does it work. So I too would always say, in the interest of the larger democratic thing, it should always stay to be what it is. What is absolutely needed, म्हणजे त्याला आपण ते मराठीत म्हणतो ना, आग रामेश्वरी आणि बंब सोमेश्वरी अशी अवस्था आहे, आणि महाशिवरात्री, त्याच्यामुळे दोन्ही एक्झाम्पल चांगले. प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे की त्याला सांगितलं काय, त्याला सांगितलं की बाबा देयर इज करप्शन, देयर इज अ लिंकेज बिटवीन, देयर इज अन अनहोली नेक्सस बिटवीन व्हॉट इज कॉल्ड ॲज बिग कॉर्पोरेट्स अँड पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज. हां, आला काय सांगायला, आपण पब्लिक फंडिंग करू, आपण सगळे इलेक्शन एका वेळेला करू, आपण पब्लिक फंडिंग करू. काय बिंडोक आहे का, ह्याच्यासाठी त्याची गरज नाही आहे, ह्याला काय पाहिजे. Can we go in for stringent norms of transparency in terms of what sort of funding do political parties receive from whom? Simple गोष्ट करायची. You amend the law to say that पार्टीला एक कवडी जरी मिळाली, एक कवडी, ₹1 जरी मिळाला, 50 पैसे जरी मिळाले, तरी पार्टी हे रिव्हील करणार पब्लिकली की हे 50 पैसे आपल्याला कुणी दिले. सिंपल, काही करायची गरज नाहीये, काहीही नाही. पब्लिक फंडिंग करू, मग किती लागतील आपल्याला, मग कुणाला किती द्यायचे, मग कुणाला. मतदारसंघांचे सायझेस व्हेरीड आहे. काही मतदारसंघ हे छोटे आहेत पण त्याची पॉप्युलेशन डेन्सिटी जास्त आहे, काही मतदारसंघ हे मोठे आहेत, त्याच्यामध्ये असलेल्या पॉप्युलेशन्स ह्या विरळ आहेत. कसं ठरवणार फंडिंग, कसं करणार. तुम्ही जर म्हटले सगळ्यांना सारखंच द्यायचं, काही गरज नाही. द ओनली थिंग दॅट इज रिक्वायर्ड इज ॲब्सोल्यूट ट्रान्सपरन्सी. काही 20,000 नाही, 2,000 नाही, काही नाही, ₹1 जरी मिळाला ना, ₹1, 50 पैसे जरी मिळाले ना, तरी देखील यू रिवील वेयर डिड दिस मनी कम फ्रॉम, हु गेव यू दिस मनी. आप इसको पब्लिक डोमेन में रख दो, मैटर एंड्स. They make it sound as if this is something that is so terrible. काय ना, म्हणजे केवढा गहन प्रश्न आहे आणि कसं ना बरं सोडवायचं, काय काहीच केलं, कळायलाच तयार नाही. The BJP should start it. All that you need is instruct Mr. Shah to put in the public domain every single rupee that the BJP has received. And given the fact that the BJP is a political arm of the RSS, every single penny that the RSS receives. Simple. Charity and revolutions start at home.
Sir, also with the opening of FDI in all major firms, sectors, don't you think the state has given up on its front? Like we don't have anything to put on table.
In what domain?
With the firms, market firms, like
It is true.
they will talk
Like the minute you say that we are a resource scarce country and we have our problems in terms of raising investments, and that's the reason why we have opened up in the search of investments from far and wide. So it's obvious that you have said that we are inadequate, we are not able to do this. So जिस लेवल से आपका इकोनॉमी, अच्छा इन्वेस्टमेंट का डिसीजन, हमेशा एक बात याद रखिए कि इन्वेस्टमेंट का डिसीजन कभी भी इज नॉट अबाउट द हियर एंड द नाउ. इन्वेस्टमेंट डिसीजन इज ऑलवेज अबाउट द नेक्स्ट टुमारो, देयर एंड देन. So nobody is investing by looking at India's 1.3 billion people. People are investing with the idea that this is going to be a 1.5 billion people का इकॉनॉमी. मग त्यावेळेला आपण ज्या डोमेन्समध्ये इन्व्हेस्ट करतोय त्याचा ग्रोथ रेट काय असणार आहे, त्याच्यामध्ये अवेलेबल असलेल्या संधी काय असणार आहे, ते बघून आपण इन्व्हेस्ट करतो. आपण कधीच इन्व्हेस्ट करताना फक्त एवढा लिमिटेड विचार नाही करत की आता 1.3 बिलियन आहे तर मग याचा आत्ताच्या घडीला काय शेप आहे. यू आर ऑलवेज इन्व्हेस्टिंग विथ अ आयडिया दॅट देयर हॅज गॉट टू बी अ रिटर्न ऑन दिस इन्व्हेस्टमेंट अँड दॅट रिटर्न इज अ रिकरिंग प्रोग्रेसिव्ह सॉर्ट ऑफ अ रिटर्न. सो आज ज्यावेळेला मी इन्व्हेस्ट करतो त्यावेळेला जर मला एवढे रिटर्न्स मिळणार असतील तर उद्या ज्यावेळेला स्टे इन्व्हेस्टेड, व्हॉट सॉर्ट ऑफ रिटर्न्स डू आय डिराइव्ह आउट ऑफ दिस. सो इन्व्हेस्टमेंट डिसिजन्स इसेन्शियली आर prospective. The idea that in 1991, with the shape, with the size of the economy that we have, with the amount of people that we have in this country, with the levels of aspirations that we have, we don't have adequate levels of investment. We just don't have adequate levels of capital. So what needs to be done is you need to open it up so that people from outside can come and start investing in this.
So in parallel, how does a economy like China manage to attract FDI, manage to keep the laws stringent and deliver development as fruit?
Plain simple, it's a one-party state. It's a one-party totalitarian state. चॅलेंज करने का नहीं, प्रश्न विचारायचे नाही. As Deng did it in 1989, I will deliver increased levels of prosperity. The party's command of the country and the army will never be put into any question. Never. तो हा प्रश्नच विचारायचा नाही की why is the party commanding the state and the army. In exchange for this, I'll deliver increased levels of prosperity. आणि त्याच्यानंतर त्या पैशाचं काय करायचं आहे ना ते तुमचं तुम्ही ठरवा. मग काय गोंधळ घालायचा तो घालायचा, पण कुठल्याही स्थितीमध्ये पार्टीचा कंट्रोल ओव्हर स्टेट आणि आर्मी ह्याच्याबद्दल प्रश्न विचारायचे नाही. प्रश्न विचारले ना की जोडला तिथल्या तिथं धरला आणि जोडला. मग इट वर्क्स, सिम्पली वर्क्स. आपल्याकडे काय करणार, आपल्याकडे तिथलं काही नाही आहे. जो आमची इच्छा आहे की तसं व्हावं, आपल्याकडे तिथं काहीच नाही आहे ना. निष्पाप काँग्रेस, आपण अर्बन डेव्हलपमेंट मिनिस्टर म्हणून राहावे आणि ठाकरेंना मुंबई BMC बंद चालवू द्यावी. मग आपल्याकडे बेस्ट मॉडेल काय आहे, आपल्याकडे बेस्ट मॉडेल काँग्रेसचं आहे. तू बी खा, मी बी खातो, तुझं तू चालू ठेव, माझं मला चालू ठेवू दे. When their worst existential crisis, Uddhav Thackeray was suddenly remembered of this and the Congress governments were such good governments. किती चांगले होते म्हटलं, बरोबर आहे, तुम्हाला ते आत्ता कळलेलं आहे. पण म्हणजे there's a certain logic in this and that logic is a circular logic. म्हणजे the Congress at a certain point of time was definitely very exploitative and very expropriative when it came to Bombay. Later on comes a time की ज्या वेळेला as you start developing as far as your political bases are concerned in a more decentralized manner, this is no longer of that primary concern to you. And especially when you have created those multiple levels of government, there's something called as MMRDA, which will sit on the prime lands in Bombay, and that decision will be taken by the urban development minister, जो हमारा chief minister है. हे आता जे राहिलेलं आहे ना, ह्या फुटपाथवरती कुणी बसून वडापाव शिजवायचा? बीएमसी. बांद्रा कुर्ला कॉम्प्लेक्सचा साईज किती असणार? MMRDA आणि अर्बन डेव्हलपमेंट. वो प्रॉब्लेम था. आपण बसून खाकरा ठेपला खावा, खा वडापाव खा. ते त्याला कळत नाही. त्यात बीजेपीची कंडिशन ती कंडिशन आहे. याला 2.5 वर्ष तिथं बसवला आणि हा सारखा सगळं झाल्याच्या नंतर परत वरती दिल्लीकडे बघतो. तुम्ही आता कसं चालेल? यू आर सिटिंग ऑन समथिंग विच इज कॉल्ड द गोल्ड माइन विच इज नोन एज बॉम्बे. सारखं वरती काय बघतो? मग तो काय करणार? तो म्हटला आता जाऊ त्याचं, मी 23 तारखेला पाणी पाचतो लोकांना. पाणी अडकलं कुठं तेच कळालं नाही. फक्त सगळं झालं त्यानंतर बँकेत पडली, मग पाणी कुठेतरी अडकलेलं आहे. मग मज्जा आहे, चांगलं आहे. म्हणून आय एम व्हेरी इररेव्हरंट अबाउट थिंग्स, बट दॅट्स गुड. दॅट्स हाऊ यू शुड अंडरस्टँड थिंग्स. ठीक आहे, बट द रीजन वाय द चायनीज कॅन ऑलवेज डू इट बिकॉज द चायनीज आर अ वन पार्टी स्टेट. If you're a one-party state, the party in control can always sort of guide the movement of the economy.